What's up? What's happening on a Friday? It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We got so much great stuff coming later on in the show. It's not like you have to wait till later to get great stuff. That would be congrats! You've reached the sucky part of the show. We're gonna save all the great stuff for later. Just let you know that today could be a day to just kick back, relax, fire up the old Odyssey app, as Michael Phillips once said. And take the show for a ride because we have our pal Nate Tice on at 6 o'clock, and we're going to talk about the NFL trends of the year when it comes to scheme. We're not going to get too deep. We're not going to get too nerdy, but some of the bigger picture things that he's seeing in the NFL. And we're Cliff Kingsbury and the things that he does, and Dan Quinn and Joe Witt and the things that they do. Fit into all of that. So that's up at 6 o'clock. And Anthony, we're actually going to start the show with some work done by the man who's going to join us at 5. Ben Standig did his 6th annual agent survey, where this year, I got to ask Ben when we have him on again at 5, how many agents did this start with? Because it's up to 31. He got 31 different NFL agents to anonymously answer a bunch of questions. That's good. That's good stuff, man. I'm excited to talk about this. We saved this kind of for today because we're going to have Ben on later. But this came out earlier in the week. And for the first of these 6 times, Anthony, people had good things to say about the Commanders.
Finally.
Yay!
It feels good to be talked about positively. Positively. Yes.
So it's the topics that they asked about. And Anthony, I'm just going to read them off real quick. And then you tell me, we're going to dive into this agent survey. You tell me which one's most interesting to you. And there's some that are more Commander specific and some that don't obviously talk on the Commanders. So we got, which is the best run franchise in the league? Which is the most unstable franchise in the league? Which franchise had the best offseason? They did some quarterback questions. Will the Cowboys and Dak Prescott agree to a contract extension? What average annual value would Patrick Mahomes receive if he was a free agent on the open market? Then you got a couple more. You got, what do you make of the Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix situation? Best talent evaluator in the league. Which GM or front office leader do you trust most? Who's the best overall GM and a future GM to watch? Which, we got a couple more. We got some NFLPA stuff. We got the Ayuk situation, 18-game schedule. Which of those topics, quarterbacks, executives, player adjacent stuff, which one is most intriguing to you?
Probably. I think we should start NFL adjacent. So let's go with the players and then bring it back to, I guess, the execs.
Yeah. Okay, let's start with the quarterback stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Will the Cowboys and 2025 free agent quarterback Dak Prescott agree to a contract extension? 18 of the 31 agents said yes. 13 of the 31 said no. Some quotes from anonymous agents. No, the Cowboys got themselves into a mess. That's what happens when the owner gets too involved and becomes friends with the players. I wouldn't pay Dak $60 million per year, and they can't make all 3 guys the highest paid at their respective positions. Of course, after this, CeeDee Lamb did just sign a deal that made him the 2nd highest paid receiver, not the 1st, but still it is a lot of money. No, the Cowboys want to play it out and are willing to pay the price if wrong. Yes, I can't imagine Jerry letting him go. Hold the line. Once you start paying guys that crazy money, they effectively own part of the team. You can get a $5 million quarterback and win 8 games. Maybe Jerry is getting hip to that reality. See, this is the funny thing about being a reporter in the NFL is agents are, one, super duper opinionated. All these dudes have lots of thoughts on lots of different things. And these are also people that are setting the market. And so they're working with their clients to understand their space in the market. And these are some of the agents that are signing some of these big deals. And I feel like some of them are actually not some of the guys signing the big deals, because I feel like some of these guys don't know anything, while others are some of the smartest people in the entire NFL ecosystem. There are some agents whose opinion I would respect. I don't have a ton of agent relationships. That was never my thing when I was a reporter. I had some, and I've had a chance to meet a couple over the years. And the couple that I know that I trust are like really, really smart people. And they have some pretty big clients. or they've been around a long time, and they understand their place in the market and like who their exact client is. And that understanding makes them excellent at what they do. But a lot of those same guys like really understand who's good, who's not. They're good talent scouts. They're good character scouts. They know who's a BSer and who's not amongst executives. And so it's kind of funny to see a quote like, once you start paying guys that crazy money, they effectively own a part of the team. You can get a $5 million QB and win 8 games. Maybe Jerry is getting hip to that reality. Dak Prescott's won 12 games 3 years in a row. So, yeah, if you want to win 8 games, sure, you could find a $5 million quarterback. But also, I don't think you actually can unless the rest of your team is sick. Because, like, Jacoby Brissett's not a $5 million quarterback. Jacoby Brissett's a $10, $12 million quarterback. Who's the $5 million quarterback that unless you're talking about a rookie, who's the $5 million quarterback that's winning you 8 games in the NFL in 2024? That guy doesn't exist. Meanwhile, I think this is like a much more money quote. The issue is whether Dak is a top 5 QB. He was in the regular season, but is he a difference maker? I think Dallas is doing right by seeing what he's worth. And like, that's actually smart. If I was the Cowboys GM and I didn't want to just pay Dak and I'm like, dang, I can't have this dude blow up in the playoffs again. We can't lose another playoff game. Or if we do, we're going to have to reset the whole thing. I might be willing to play it out one more season. And that's a huge risk because Dak's going to be really expensive because if he goes out and wins, then okay. But at that point, are you just going like, we think he's really good. We're going to have to pay him anyway. What's an extra $5 million a year at that point compared to not paying him at all? I'd rather pay him an extra 5 and have that be my penalty because he actually finally comes through in the playoffs and maybe even leads us to a Super Bowl versus I paid a dude $60 million that I shouldn't have paid at all. That's a worse mistake. And that is the only defense I could possibly give of the Cowboys position. The correct answer would have been to pay Dak 2 years ago or a year ago, or certainly earlier this offseason before Burrow and all those dudes got paid. But at this point, yikes, man. This is the conundrum they've got themselves into, but it's interesting to see on the agent survey side of it, all of the different opinions from all these people in the league.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I'm really interested in why no one really mentioned, I guess, Dak's playoff success. I feel like during the season, like, I think Dak does enough just to, like, get you. He does just enough just to get you, to the playoffs. But once, December, January rolls around, it's just he doesn't really make all that big of a difference. So I think that's more so where Dallas is right now. They just want to win. So I think if Dallas goes out, wins 1 or 2 games in the playoffs, I think Dak gets his $60 million. Yes, it's easy.
And at that point, he's worth it based on where the contract is, or the quarterback contracts league wide are. Because that's the thing, he hasn't done it. I don't know that means he's incapable. Those are two different things. Michael Jordan couldn't win a championship until he did. LeBron James couldn't win a championship until he did. And Dak Prescott, sure as you know what, is not Michael Jordan or LeBron James.
Yep.
But he might be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. He's played like it the last couple years. Last year, he was a top 5 quarterback. He was an MVP candidate. And then playoffs, yikes, bro. And so if he can get over that hump this year, well, then he's probably a bona fide top 5 quarterback. And you're going to have to pay him. He's younger than you think. How old do you think Dak Prescott is, Anthony? Let's put this to the test. How old do you
28.
think?
He's my age, I think.
Dak Prescott, well, he's older than that. He's 31.
Oh, never mind.
But people think he's like 34. He's not. He's probably got 3-4 years left. So you sign him to one deal. And you hope to take him through the end. Why did you think he was 28?
I don't know.
Probably because I said he's younger than you think. And you might have actually
when I was
known.
So when I was in college, I think was his senior. It might have been his senior year. I don't know. He was in college when I was in college, and
but maybe it was his senior year and your freshman year.
Yeah, that's probably what it was. I don't know. But when you say he's younger than I think he is, I was like, maybe he's trying to throw me off. Maybe he's my year, but yeah, he's not. I should know. Lamar's my year. I'm tripping.
Okay.
And Baker Mayfield.
Who was my year? Like Andrew? No,
we had 5 quarterbacks come out my year.
2012, because Cam was 11. I guess it was Luck. Luck came out because Luck stayed the extra year. So, yeah, me and Andrew Luck. Me and Captain Andrew Luck.
Oh, that's your dog.
Salute. Are there any actual active? I mean, I guess then, obviously, Robert would have been 2012.
Russell Wilson.
Russ. Yeah, so there's a couple. Kirk.
Oh, yeah, Kirk.
So there's a couple still around. Class of 2012.
I'm not going to lie,
Tried to forget
that
some of these.
So far away.
Yeah, I've been out of college a long time.
And not to say you're old, but it just sounds distant.
I hear you. Yeah. I mean,
let me just double down one more time. It sounds so far away.
Yeah, Lamar ain't a spring chicken anymore, bro.
Yeah, he's not. I'm not either.
No.
I'm not either.
No.
And that's a sad reality.
It's just, this is life. This is a segment that has gone out of control because Anthony tried to call me old. And one of two things is happening. Either you have listeners who are like in their 40s and 50s being like, y'all are young. If you think 30 is old, just wait. Also, shut up, Haney. You don't know anything. 30's not old. Stupid young whippersnapper.
Yep.
And then you have people that are younger than us listening being like, y'all are basically dead.
Good gracious.
Yeah. So, and then people our age are just confused. They're like, I don't know. Are we old? Are we young? Depends on the day.
Yeah.
Depends on the day. Depends on the step you take and whether you feel it in your back and hip and such. Anyway, the point is, we'll do more from the agent survey next. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube if you like as well at the Team 980. We're taking a look at Ben Standig's agent survey, the 6th annual that he has done. And the first one that really has been kind to the Commanders. Obviously, there's a lot of new people in charge, which is one of the kind parts of the survey. We'll talk about it more with Ben in person, or I guess on the phone, if you will. He's going to be on the show at 5 o'clock. That was the point of that. And so we'll get a lot more insight, et cetera, et cetera. But we right now are going to take a look at the parts of the survey that really were kind to the Commanders, and that is the executives. When it comes to best talent evaluator, Anthony, Adam Peters got 3 votes, which puts him tied for, I guess, third place. John Schneider and Brett Veach, the Seahawks and Chiefs general managers, both got 4, and then Gutekunst, the Packers GM, got 3 votes as well of the 31. Peters 3, Chris Ballard, Eric DeCosta, Brad Holmes, and Nolan Teasley, who's the Seahawks assistant GM, actually got 2, along with those other names that I mentioned. So a couple of people on Peters said, again, these are NFL agents, anonymous to Ben Standig. Peters might be a curious choice since he just got a GM job, but look at his time with the 49ers and the start with Washington. They've already done an excellent job flipping around the scouting department. Just having a scouting structure is something that Washington hasn't had for about 20 years. No GM is the sole evaluator of a team. And I thought that's a really, really fascinating comment because for years, they've had people that I think were pretty respected as scouts. But there was no great process to get the information out of those scouts and use it optimally. I think Kyle Smith did a good job. Like, if you look at the good drafts that they had, it's because the first year of Scott McCloughan, they had some of that stuff. The draft or 2 that Kyle Smith had where he was actually in charge and allowed to cook, if you will, like, those are some of the better drafts that Washington has had. Certainly not no misses, certainly not perfect, but like, they got some good players, and some of the guys that come out of those drafts are the ones that are still around here a bunch of years later. Meanwhile, the past bunch of years where Ron had way too much on his plate, and I'm not trying to just dump on Ron because everyone thinks that now it's like dump on Ron Rivera season, but the reality is when your head coach is also the GM, you don't have someone who's as dedicated to the scouting who's in charge. And so, if there's ways to circumvent the system. Oh, I got to get this on the head coach's desk. I'm going to go around the GM or a guy, whether it was Mayhew or Marty Herney. Those 2, I don't know that their roles were always super clear on who should do what and whose voice was listened to. And they may have changed from year to year, or sometimes another voice came in. Whatever it was, we know that, obviously throughout the entirety of the time, Dan Snyder had veto power and used multiple first-round picks on quarterbacks in ways that the football people didn't always approve of. So now that you have clear hierarchy, clear, great scouting voice, even before you take some of the scouts and move them around in ways that Adam Peters has done since the draft, during this first draft, everybody knew exactly what they were supposed to do. Doesn't mean there weren't upgrades in talent, and there already has been. After the draft, they moved on from some of the scouts, and they reassigned some others and brought in some of their own people. But between the smart people they brought in, Adam, Lance Newmark, Brandon Sosna, who we'll talk about more in a second, et cetera, and just having a system, I think it's pretty clear they have a lot better process, and you see that with the talent they brought in the draft and really, frankly, in free agency as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm loving the fact that he is up here, but also I think there was somebody else that commented and was like, look at, what he did in San Francisco. I think he possibly could have got even more votes had, this been like next year and, this season actually gone, pretty well. I just think people are a little, I guess, cautious, to like, anoint him and give him that best talent evaluator as a GM, just because he is stepping into a new role. And, he had John Lynch ahead, or I guess partner with him while over in San Fran.
But I think that a lot of agents realize that, like, while Lynch's opinion was super valued, like Peters is a scout. Yeah. And I think a lot of agents, because there's some agents that like have a little bit of a scouting background sometimes, or every agent likes to think that they're a great scout, whether that's actually true or not. So like, I think there's a respect for Peters that way. And I think also the way Adam treats people. Which GM or front office leader do you trust most? 31 responses from agents around the league to Ben Standig. And with 2 of those votes, which is tied for third, is Adam Peters. It's Elliott Wolf from the Patriots, Brett Veach from the Chiefs, 4 and 3, and then tied with 2, Steelers GM Omar Khan, who's been around forever, and Nick Caserio of the Texans. And then it's Adam Peters. And so the fact that he's already earned the trust of all these people that he deals with is a great sign for the future in terms of negotiations, trades. Like, if you're an agent, you want to put your player in a position to succeed. I think you trust Adam Peters wouldn't be bringing your guy in if he didn't think that that was the case. I think that the way that Dan Quinn runs things, frankly, along with Adam, like, they give guys shots to compete. So if you're an agent who has UDFA type players or like guys that are going to sign league minimum 1-year deals and you want them to be able to come in and legitimately have a chance to make the roster and compete, you're going to trust that Adam is actually going to make sure that your guy has a shot. There's no guarantees. Like, I bet you Anthony Pittman's agent is bummed out on roster cut down day. Here's a veteran that they signed and brought in, and he had a chance to make the team, but he didn't. It was a competition, and he didn't win the competition. But I'm sure that there's a level of respect there that's like, hey, my guy had a shot, and that's what you want, I think. And to know that if you're dealing with a contract situation or whatever, that the person across the table from you is going to deal honestly with you. And part of that's different for Washington this year compared to any other year is that they have the power to do it. You know that Adam Peters is in charge. Josh Harris is not going to come in and undercut him. When you were dealing with Bruce Allen and Ron Rivera and anybody else, and I'm not saying those guys were great at the job, obviously, but you also know that Dan Snyder could come in and wipe something out. And if you could shortcut and go straight to the owner, you might be able to get a better deal. And that's not the case anymore.
Yeah. How much of this question do you think is about the GM, the person? Because, again, I think the point you just made about Anthony Pittman, who they brought in as a free agent, the relationship between AP and, his agent, not necessarily saying like it may be fractured just because, he didn't make the roster, but I think there's a respect level, and
for sure
he just respect who
straight shooter.
Adam. Yeah, he's straightforward guy.
For sure. I think that's all you want is, like, if you tell me something, you can tell me bad news, but don't tell me something's good when it's bad. And frankly, don't tell me something's bad when it's good. Like, I got to be able to trust you so that I can make informed decisions with and for my client. That's what I want if I'm an agent. And the fact that Adam already has that trust from some people in the league, and I'd be curious to do like a ranked choice voting, like, or like a scale. Like, do you trust this GM on 1 to 5, a scale of 1 to 5? And how many people would have put Adam Peters at a 4 or a 5 compared to other GMs? Like, how would he have ranked there versus just a simple, who do you trust the most?
Yeah.
And him getting some votes. I thought the other interesting thing, for years and years and years in Washington, part of the problem, with the exception of that one staff in 2013 that we all know has now produced, 5 head coaches, and Kyle and Sean and Raheem and all those guys.
Matt.
Yeah, Matt, Mike
McDaniel.
Yeah, so there's at least 5. There hasn't been a lot of talent that's come through the building. And on the front office side, like, there hasn't been any future GMs that have come through the building. Kyle's probably the best personnel executive that's gone through here, and he's the director of player personnel or vice president. I think he's the VP of player personnel in Atlanta now. So he's like a number 2 or number 3, depending on their hierarchy down there. But for the most part, like, you haven't had top flight executives being recruited out of here. That's going to change. That's going to change, and it's going to change quickly. Future GM to watch in the agent survey for Ben Standig. 31 responses, 3 of them, which is the second most of anybody, Brandon Sosna, Commanders Senior Vice President of Football Ops. That is pretty high marks for a guy who, by the way, Anthony, is as old as Dak Prescott. He is 31 years old.
Good gracious.
One agent says, I can give several reasons for choosing Brandon Sosna. He is transparent and beyond intelligent. At a very young age, he has been a crucial figure in 2 organizations at a high level. He's only 31 now. It's a coup for Washington. So talk about having brain trust in the building. I mean, Lance Newmark, I think, is well-respected and well-liked. And we saw, we heard him yesterday, pretty sharp guy, super on message, clearly a huge asset for Adam. But Sosna, like, that dude's not going to be here in 5 years. And he'll be 36, but he'll be running a team somewhere. or he'll be assistant GM somewhere, or they'll have to figure out a way to give him a bigger title here if they want to keep him. Because even though he's a senior VP, like he's a number 3 level. Like he's reporting to Newmark, who reports to Peters, if he's not reporting directly to Peters himself. Yeah, that dude is extremely respected, well liked, and coveted, I would say, around the league.
Yeah, the structure just of the organization in general. You talk about the executive side, and you also look at the coaching side. Granted, like we have people who are going to be, highly coveted after this first year, but there's always a success plan. And I just think having him as, your number 3 is a super luxury right now. So
for sure,
it doesn't surprise me that, he's number 3 on this, or number 2, 3 list.
Yeah, he's number 2 on the list.
Number 2. Yeah, number 2.
I think that it will be interesting to see, like, the Eagles have had a bunch of people. Because, like, when teams go to poach GMs, right, it's not just the assistant GM. There's, like, 3 dudes from the Eagles that interviewed multiple times. And I know they've got a couple more in the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
The Ravens, some of these big, good front offices, the 49ers have had people interview. Peters hasn't left, but other people under Peters did leave, I think, previously from San Francisco under John Lynch in that front office. That's going to be Washington. And, like, especially like if they're good in the next couple of years, Lance Newmark's going to get looks to be a GM because he will have been a part of the rebuild in Detroit and then the rebuild here. And some sorry team is going to be like, please help rebuild us. And then Sosna will either be elevated here or he's going to be getting looks because Washington is good. And the alternative is you're bad and no one wants your people. You don't want that. I'd rather be good and be poached than be bad and not have to worry about it because, well, those people are going to be looking for jobs for different reasons because they ain't going to be here no more. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And coming up next, something that would have been our number 1 story in May and June is happening tonight, and I bet you don't even know about it. I'm going to ask you if you're still interested next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Ben Standig, 5 o'clock, latest Commanders news of the day. This is our final Friday, not leading into an NFL weekend for a long, long time. Of course, college football this weekend, but we'll talk to Ben about the latest Commanders news and the agent survey that we were just reacting to in the first half hour of the show. Nate Tice, 6 o'clock, on what he's seen from Jayden Daniels so far, as well as some of the trends that he's seeing unfold as we head into the 2024 season. However, Anthony, pop quiz. Did you know that tonight Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark are squaring off in their fourth and final matchup of the WNBA regular season?
I did not know this. I have been locked in on all of the big college football matchups. At Colorado yesterday, we have a slate of games this weekend that I'm really excited about. And the reason I didn't know this, I want to blame ESPN. I want to blame ABC. I want to blame all these, media outlets for not pumping it, because that's a game I'm going to tune into now that I know. What time do they play?
7 o'clock tonight. Or I guess the pregame's probably at 7, tip-off's at 7:30.
Okay,
that's the Ion formula on Friday nights for the WNBA. And in May, when this would have happened, this would have been our top story, right? We did segments on this, and I got the numbers to back up that people were interested. Like we track whether people are listening or not. And there's obviously, the NFL is still king. That is the case, especially in local sports radio. The local NFL team is king. More people are tuned in now as they're getting ready to watch Jayden Daniels, and they're checking in because it's the NFL season, and they're friends that follow it maybe a little bit closer. There's some optimism that, like, hey, this Jayden kid's pretty good. Like, the Commanders might be worth watching. I know it's been a tough couple of years, but like, might be time to tune back in, get in on the ground floor. So I realized that, and we're guilty of it on this radio show. Like, we're going to serve the biggest audience because that's what mass communications is. And but I'm genuinely curious because what we would do sometimes is kind of do a check-in in May, in June, in early July. Hey, you still watching? And we got a lot of calls of people being like, yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad that I got hooked through March Madness, watching Angel Caitlin or the Iowa, UConn, Caitlin versus Paige Becker's game, whatever it is, whatever game that you tuned in to, that whether it was you were the one of the 10 million, the 14 million, the 20 million that watched some of those games, people stuck around in higher numbers than ever before. The WNBA has had more 1 million viewer broadcasts this season than ever before, and there is a playoff stretch, like final 10 games of the regular season and playoffs still to come, with some huge marquee matchups, including tonight, with Caitlin and Angel having their final battle of the regular season. And by the way, they're currently the last two teams in the playoffs, seed 7 and 8. And so I'm curious at 301-230-0980, are you still interested? Whether you knew or not, now that you know, are you going to watch tonight? Are you going to flip on Ion like you might have earlier in the regular season? Or are you kind of in a it was a really great, and to be clear, I want to say this up front, because I feel like sometimes people turn this stuff into culture war nonsense, and that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not looking to shame. Like, if you want to call in and be like, women shouldn't play sports, then yeah, like, we're going to hang up on you real quick and just pretend like you don't exist. We're just going to move on to the next call. Like, that's not what we're after. But if you're like, hey, I like football more than basketball, and it was great to have a basketball game on a Friday night in the middle of the summer, but now, and I'm not a huge baseball guy, so I'd rather watch the Mystics or the Fever. Or, I watch Caitlin Clark and she's really fun. But now that there's college football on tonight, I'm back to college football. That's fine with me. I'm not here to yuck your yum. I'm not here to judge people based off of their sporting preferences. So just to be clear, like, this isn't some kind of gotcha trap. We're not doing that. This is a pure sporting question because we all have our hierarchy, right? I watch certain sports that many of you listening don't watch. You watch certain stuff. Like, a lot of you listening watch a lot more college football than me. That's fine. I got other stuff that I'd rather watch than college football. We have fun with March Madness every year because I like to poke fun at college basketball. But like, if that's your thing, that's your thing. I prefer the NBA. That's my personal preference. But I'm curious, with the tremendous growth that we've seen and the numbers that we've seen the WNBA put up this year if you have continued to follow it throughout the summer. And now that you've made it, 3/4 of the way through the season and the playoffs are around the corner, but that big behemoth football is back, are you still locked in? 301-230-0980. My guess is, Anthony, that there are some fans that probably tried to follow it, and especially if you follow sports in part by watching the games and then checking out some of the online discourse on Twitter or YouTube or wherever it is, that there are some fans that got really sick of the discourse, and unfortunately it turned them off. And there are times that I wanted to turn it off as well because it was hard to watch without thinking about what could be said. And I thought this was actually hilariously summed up by my guy Tony, who I've mentioned a couple times this week because he's in the fantasy league. But he made a really funny video the other day that had a little bit of fun with Angel Reese's recent string of missing baskets, getting her own rebound, missing, it's a thing, right? If you're going to miss, better to get your own rebound than not, but making it is good. And he kind of had some fun with that, and the comments just sought to destroy him. And so he made this video on TikTok that summed up the experience.
And what did we learn? If you make a video about Angel Reese, the Trump voters come. It's like a mating call for racists. Why can't I make a funny video about a sports figure and not have it turn into Fox News? Because Angel and Caitiln aren't just sports figures. They're lightning rods, through no fault of their own. Well, will it ever just be normal sports talk with them and not all weird? No, my child, this world is doomed.
I experienced this week as well. I'm not going to say anything on the political things, but the last part of, will it ever not be weird? Lord, I hope so. Because, Anthony, we talked earlier in the week about Caitiln and Angel just being rookies and areas where they have shined and areas where they have improved. And some of the comments are some of the weirdest things that I've ever received on the internet. Like, it's incapable of, how could you put them in the same sentence? They're rookies in the WNBA. That's a sentence. They're together. I didn't say they were equals. I didn't hint who I was voting for Rookie of the Year, and I'd actually vote for the same person you want to. So I understand if you got caught up in some of that and you're like, I'm out of here. But hopefully, the worst people on the internet haven't ruined some of the best basketball. And tonight, I've told you could enjoy it. Is this Ahmad, Anthony? Do I have the pronunciation right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Ahmad is on the Team 980 listener line. Ahmad, have you kept up with the W throughout the summer? And now that football's back, will you watch, or college football's back, will you say, watch this game tonight?
Yes. I mean, I didn't know that this game was on until you just, covered it. So I'll definitely be tuning in because I've kept up with all of the rookies and the top teams, of course, Asia as well. And I didn't know that they were playing tonight, so I'll definitely keep up. I do want to give a shout-out to you, though. Amazing content, both on the radio. If you guys don't know, he has an incredible YouTube page as well. You need to follow all the content. Just pumping out great content on all different social medias and, all various of media as well. So definitely want to shout you out.
Appreciate that, Ahmad. Much appreciated. And enjoy the game tonight. And Anthony,
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for the call, man. To your point, Anthony, earlier, this is why sometimes when, say that, I'm not gonna go on the full version of the rant. I'm gonna just make the point calmly, right?
It is a Friday, Craig.
Yeah, we don't need to cause problems. It's a Friday. We're just chilling. Standig's coming on in a few minutes. We're gonna do a weekend preview next. We don't need to go full on. However, when Stephen A goes on his who's done more for women's sports than me nonsense, right? This is the point. You, someone who watches TV and covers sports for a living, this is your job, right? And you watch a lot of the morning shows and flip around and kind of see what's going on, right? Ahmad, dedicated enough to listen to the radio show, follow our content on various social media platforms. These are people that pay attention. And ESPN specifically, and to a lesser extent FS1, because ESPN, this is factual. This is not my personal viewing preference. But actually, I'm not going to get into it. The point is, these huge national shows have the ability to drive content and drive interest in sports. So when Monica McNutt went back and Stephen A was like, you could have been talking about this stuff 3 years ago. Here is the proof point. If First Take led today with Caitlin Angel Part 4 versus whatever, probably 78th segment, what do they lead with? Let me guess, Dak Prescott contract.
They did lead with that, and then they went Colorado.
Fair enough. And like, it's day one of college football, Heisman favorite, potential number one pick, and Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, like 2 top 5 picks plan, perfectly reasonable. But if the W's in the show today, Ahmad just didn't, and you just didn't, learn that one of the marquee games of the season is on tonight from me. And that's kind of the point. So I am curious. We're going to do our weekend preview next, but if folks want to, I guess we could take a couple calls if we wanted to real quick, or if you want to tweet me at Craig Hoffman. I'm just curious. Have people, really the question is, has your sports diet changed? Like, was there a permanent turn towards the W, for instance, being a part of your sports diet? Or was it something that like, hey, it's going to be a part during the summer, but now that football's back, we know what the score is. It's up to everybody. So my curiosity was running on a Friday. 301-230-0980 if you want to get in real quick. But more than that, or other than that, our weekend preview is next before Ben Standig joins us at 5 o'clock. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Ben Standig, 5 o'clock, 11 minutes from now, talking about the latest in Command Land and his agent survey, 6th annual, biggest one he's ever done. Excited to talk about that with him. It is time, though, Anthony, for the weekend preview, brought to you by...
Nobody.
Dang. And it's week 1 of college football, Anthony. I can roll through some games, but if there's one that you already are pumped about, then you tell me what your number 1 game of the weekend is if you're locked into it.
All right, so I'll preface it by saying my favorite game of the entire week 1 slate was probably yesterday, just because I'm not a Colorado fan. Like, I'm a Syracuse fan.
Yeah.
But I want Colorado to do good. So
no, I think
all
it's good
eyes
for the
were
sport.
on the
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting to watch them. There's some of the stuff that Deion's doing that's driving, like, it's just so dumb. Like, bro, you're a college football coach. Take questions from reporters. Shut up. Quit complaining about it. Yeah. But the swag they play with, like, it's fun football. And Shador is awesome, like, legitimately sick. And obviously Travis Hunter is special.
He is different, man. Oh my gosh. I don't know. I still don't know how he caught the 3rd touchdown of his 3 TDs. Just because the guy was draped literally all over him, and he still got that hand up somehow.
Yeah, they started. They started hot last year and collapsed. I mean, part of that was obviously Hunter got hurt, but I think some stuff got figured out too. There was a piercing of the armor, and all of a sudden, I'm mixing metaphors here, but the Emperor had no clothes. And
I mean, it's still true this year. Like, yesterday, they didn't run the ball really well. The defenses are pretty, light in the ass. Well, the second half, they
scouting term Anthony Haney there.
Yeah, they fought back a little bit in the second half.
We'll see once they get in conference and how things go.
Yeah,
what else?
This weekend,
yeah,
I will go Georgia, Clemson.
Feels like the right answer.
I'm really fascinated to see, because first of all, Dabo, he loves going on people, in the transfer portal and colleges, just spending so much time in that portal. Let's see, if what he believes can hold, true against a team like Georgia that is always in the transfer portal and things of that nature. So I'm looking out for that one. And then Ohio State, I'm really excited to see just Ohio State. I don't care about their opponent. I just want to see how the kid Caleb Downs looks. They also have a freshman wide receiver. His name is escaping me right now. Something Smith. He's going to be better than Marvin Harrison Jr. Apparently.
I have a hard time believing that. Hold on, one game at a time. There, sir. Settle down.
Bad. Too much.
Clemson, Georgia is probably your best. Or it's your lowest combined ranking of the weekend, right? Like, if you combine the 2 numbers next to the team's name for any 2 teams that actually have numbers, there aren't a lot of ranked on ranked games this weekend. Well, Georgia's ranked first, so that's a good contribution, and Clemson's ranked 14th. Carson Beck. What is he going to do? He's a 5th-year player who spent his entire career at one school. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. So the value of that experience, and he's a guy that I think teams are looking at next year, potential first rounder. We'll see if he can stay up in that realm. But he's going to be the quarterback on a national title favorite. So that always is helpful. Meanwhile, Cade Klubnik, the players to watch section I'm reading on ESPN.com. In stark contrast to Beck, Klubnik's first full season as a starter was marred by miscues and poor choices. Yikes. So that is that game. That one's taking place, by the way, at Mercedes-Benz. It's the Aflac kickoff game, noon on ABC. And then what'd you have? You said Ohio State, Anthony, was your second game. Yeah, they're facing Akron. But I did see, Urban Meyer's not exactly the most trustworthy guy you've ever talked to, but he is actually very good on television talking about college football. Should never be allowed to coach again. And frankly, for what he did as a coach, he shouldn't be allowed to be an analyst. But I did see what he said about Ohio State, and he said, I've now been around that program a long time, and I have never seen a roster with this much talent. And think of some of the rosters that he had at Ohio State and some of the titles that he won. That Zeke team, like, up and down, the Stroud team a couple years ago, like, they are loaded at Ohio State. They are favored over Akron by 48.5.
48.5. Insane.
48.5, Anthony.
But the thing is, Craig, they were in the transfer portal. They got kids from Alabama. They got kids from all over. And then they have the kid, Jeremiah Smith. I got to see if he is worth the hype that he's been receiving. Because, again, he's drawing parallels to Marvin Harrison. We know what Marvin Harrison did his 3 years at Ohio State. And he was in a loaded room. And this kid is also in the loaded room. But guess what? He's starting. He's starting.
As a freshman?
It's crazy. Yes.
That's
As a
nuts.
freshman.
That's nuts. Ohio State, they got a kind of a soft launch in the season. Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, Michigan State, and then Iowa and Oregon back-to-back weeks once you get in October. So September's kind of soft, but Iowa's ranked 25th, and then Oregon's ranked 3rd. And then they get Nebraska, and then they're at Oregon, then at Penn State.
Woo.
That's 3 weeks in October, into November. So that Ohio State middle part of the year going to be really, really fun to watch. Anything else from the college football realm that you want to highlight for the weekend? What's Syracuse doing this weekend? What are the boys in orange doing?
That is a great question. I'm going to be rooting for those guys from afar, but I couldn't tell you who they were playing.
We got the old Ohio State quarterback transferred in.
Oh, we have Ohio. They play tomorrow at 3:30. I think my game ends around like 4, so I think I'm going to try to catch the tail end of it.
Other ranked games of the weekend: Notre Dame, Texas A&M, 7:30 Saturday on ABC, and then you got the Sunday night game because it's week 1 of college football.
Yes, sir.
USC LSU. So how does LSU do post Jaden Daniels? I wonder if Jaden will be there. A lot of times guys go to those games week 1. Although this game is in Vegas on Sunday night, so I'm gonna guess not because I'm gonna guess he's probably got practice on Monday. Tough bit. He'll have to wait for the bye week, and then he can go to an LSU game. But you got USC LSU in Vegas, which is kind of funny that it's USC LSU with Jaden and Caleb, being 1 and 2 picks in the draft. So
and Cliff being his,
Sure, but I'm just saying, the fact that they're 2 alma maters in the first game without them, the storylines are mirrored. It's like, how will LSU move on without Jaden Daniels? How will USC move on without Caleb Williams? Find out when they run into each other in Las Vegas. So that's your college football weekend preview. Sunday night, by the way, Spirit out in San Diego. Can they continue after their torrid start to the second half of the season against Kansas City last week? Nats, as we said, are home against the Cubs. Can Dylan Cruz pick up where he left off the other night with a home run? Mystics trying to win their 4th in a row tomorrow against Connecticut. So local teams in action this weekend. But, of course, much of the sporting world has eyes on college football as it returns in earnest. And then next weekend, Anthony, it's time. The NFL is back. Ben Standig joins us to talk about his agent survey and the latest in Command Land next. show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Did Standig ask for Springsteen, Anthony?
Nah, I just decided to give him some.
He's just a sports writer, so every sports writer gets Springsteen. That's how it goes.
Maybe.
You know what he needs first, though? It's the introduction to Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Ben Standig, Commanders beat reporter for The Athletic, is with us, author of The Athletic's annual NFL Agent Survey and certified bona fide sports writer. Standig, do you fit the classic archetype stereotype of a giant Bruce Springsteen fan?
No, I like Springsteen, but unfortunately, have never actually seen him in concert, and I don't worship at the altar of Bruce, even though the boss is the boss and would love to see him. But no, I'm not one of those kind of sports writers.
Yeah, no, I kind of sounds like we're in the same boat. Like, I like him. My dad is a huge super fan, so I definitely grew up with a lot of Springsteen in the house. But I'm not a lot of let's just say a lot of sports writers. Did you see the photo of the ESPN Insider Avengers assembling at the Springsteen show in New York? That was literally Jeff Passan, Woj, Schefter, anybody who was the top insider at ESPN was all at this same Springsteen show. And I was like, this is a little on the nose, guys.
Yeah, every time I hear some sports writer say that that's their go-to, it is okay, I guess you just read that in the playbook to some degree that this is part of the deal, but sure. Enjoy yourself. I like the boss, but
yeah, maybe we're doing it wrong, Standig. Maybe we'd have higher profile gigs if we just were bigger Springsteen fans. Anyway, I think you're doing the Lord's work with this agent survey. I think it's really cool. It's something I look forward to every single year. Can you take us kind of a little bit inside the process and how it's evolved over the years? When you did the first annual one, how many agents were you talking to? What was the feedback like? How cooperative were they? Versus this year, now 6 years in, you got 31 agents, and for I believe every single poll question that you asked, you got a full 31 responses. So what has it been like to do this year over year, and what was it like putting together this year's version?
Yeah, it was when I got to The Athletic back in 2019, it was a little more of the wild, wild west back then. You could kind of, if you had an idea, you could probably execute it. And I was, trying to come in there and, make a name for myself. And, look, agents have an interesting reputation, as we all know. A little used car salesman, a little Bob Sugar in the Jerry Maguire movie. But they represent these players. They also, therefore, the ones that talk to the teams. They talk to not just one or two teams. They talk to all the teams, so they have good comparison points. And at first it was sort of a little bit of hey, tell me about what are the key things about your job that we don't know about, and then some league stuff. And it's probably morphed more into questions about the league. There's a lot of questions this year or every year about general managers, who's good at their job, who do they trust, things like that, and then a lot of other specific topics. But look, I try to change up the roster of people responding, but it's not completely that way. There's some people who've been in it several years, and from that, you gain trust that you're not going to expose them or burn them or whatever. And so that's led to I think more, like you said, more full responders, as well as a little more honest views in some cases. And I had a lot of questions I had to leave on the cutting room floor just because of space or what have you. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And I'd imagine, as someone who talks to a lot of folks around the league, and especially a lot of agents, your conversations in the last 18 months have been very different than they were the first 4.5 years that you were doing this. And obviously you've been covering the team for longer than that. Is this the first time that you feel not because last year was still a transition time, this year doing this, that when you get to the Commanders and you ask any questions you might about them, and or you're asking league questions, and all of a sudden people have positive things to say about Washington? Was that a first, and what were those conversations like? Because I presume most of these agents know that is your day job is covering the Commanders.
Yeah. There's a question that is one question is what's the best run organization, a top to bottom, not just the front office, but the whole thing, and then which is the most unstable. And the top answer for unstable this year was the Panthers with 9 votes out of 31. But honestly, the answer I got the most
was, boy, this is a lot easier when I could just pick Washington. They actually had to think about it. And for years, that was a constant. And, Bruce Allen was not somebody that was on everybody's Christmas list. Obviously, Dan Snyder goes without saying. And then, whether it was Jay Gruden or Ron Rivera, since I've been doing it, that factored in as well. But, yeah, there was a lot of positives about the Commanders in this one from Adam Peters and just kind of everything that they did this offseason. And just to be clear, this isn't winning off the field. This isn't winning the offseason when it meant signing Bruce Smith and Deion Sanders. This is putting infrastructure in place, getting rid of a poor setup to have a much better one, and people are bullish on that. So, yes, a very, very, very different vibe this year talking to people about the Commanders than the previous years.
One of the quotes that really caught my eye is Ben Standig's with us here on the Hoffman Show. Of course, Ben, from his day job covering the Commanders on the beat for The Athletic, but also the author of their annual agent survey, which just came out this week. You can read it in The Athletic. One of the things that caught my eye, one of the quotes, Commanders adjacent, was they have a scouting structure now, something that they haven't had for 20 years, paraphrase from the agent who told you that. Can you, did you follow up on that, or just generally, can you expand on that based off of your knowledge of covering the team day to day? What do you think that agent meant, / what does it mean to have a scouting structure, and how has it mattered for them this offseason?
Yeah, I think part of it is we've all heard the stories, right? Dan Snyder comes in from off the yacht to make the pick, or Bruce Allen in the middle of the night makes a trade for Alex Smith and doesn't even consult his head coach. The fact that these things were occurring, it's not like they didn't have scouts on the road, but I think they do have a deeper group of people now on the scouting side in general. But now there's more checks and balances. There's more of a collaboration. There's now more of a logical, here's a scout, sends up the report, it goes up to the food chain, eventually gets to Peters, and then, at some point they have a conversation about this player, whether just, individually or in the context of the draft and so on. And before, even if you did some of those things, it just, chaos would eventually ensue. And so I think it's a lot of that. Now, even the last few years, we obviously have all discussed the last week or so about how the draft classes have been pretty poor, for this group. But even then, at least it was sort of all right, there's at least some sort of a structure. It just wasn't, maybe you didn't have the right people at the end of the line, taking all the data and using that to find players. Ironically, a lot of the scouts who were there then are still here now. They didn't fire a ton of scouts or anything. It's just there is more of a plan, of a process, of a structure to what is happening to get hopefully the best results.
Ben Standig with us here on the Hoffman Show. Adam Peters receives a couple of votes, one of the higher vote totals in terms of most trusted general managers. I'm guessing in years past when you've done this and asked the, hey, who's the future GM question, his name has come up. How do you think the respect and relationships that he's had have helped Washington hit the ground running in a way that maybe even they didn't anticipate? And sorry for the long-winded question here, Ben, but one of the things that caught my ear over the last couple of days when Peters spoke earlier in the week and when Newmark did yesterday was they both said they got more done this offseason than they anticipated, which I thought was an interesting thing to kind of let out of the bag. And I'm curious how you think that their ability to hit the ground running goes back to maybe some work that they had done to build some of their relationships and things like that, earn the trust of agents over the past couple of years that they were in different positions.
Yeah, no, so yeah, like you said, one of the questions is who's the future GM to watch? It's a question I've been asking for 5 of the 6 years. And in the previous 4, Adam Peters received at least 1 vote every year. And the last 3 years, he either was the outright winner or tied for first. So his reputation has been pretty stacked for a while. He's just obviously waiting to find a good opportunity. Look, I think that he's obviously well respected. He was on a team with San Francisco that had, a ton of success during that time that he was there. And, it says a lot about, even just beyond this survey, just since, Peters was on the radar to get the job done once he did, I just, over and over again, people were pretty effusive in their praise of him, both as an executive, as a talent evaluator, and just as a person to deal with. So obviously, I think that has a lot to do with his ability to get this thing going, because he clearly is coming from a good place of understanding what it takes to get this thing done. And Newmark, he's been in the game for a long time. He's with the Lions this entire time, which obviously for most of that tenure was not really a good thing in terms of the success they were having. But the last few years, certainly they've turned things around, and he was there for that as well. And he and Peters, became tight over the years of being on the road and so on. So, yeah, I mean, Peters clearly knows what to do, how it all works out. We'll have to wait and see. But he clearly has a great reputation, and he was. Like, there was another question about who is the best GM. Well, since he hasn't actually had the job, really, he wasn't involved there. But it's not going to surprise me at all if he's top 5 on that list by next year, assuming that Washington at least has a competitive year, even if that doesn't mean a ton of losses or a ton of wins.
Right. No, totally with you on that. I'm also curious, Ben, because Brandon Sosna then is second, receiving 3 of the votes for who is a future GM on this year's version. When was the last time Washington had someone that was a viable answer? Because I just feel like there's been such a dearth of talent in the building for such a long time. In the history of you doing this, has there ever been a Washington person on the future GM the list like Brandon Sosna already is in year 1 under Adam Peters here in DC?
Yeah, Lance Newmark also got 1 vote in that category. No, I think the answer is no. I'm not sure that Kyle Smith ever did get one. Like, when I would talk to people about Kyle, he was not, sure, there were people that liked him, but I think just like with so many other aspects, everybody was brought down by the dark clouds hovering over this place, and nobody could get complete, get the complete feel goods from others around the league, because it's always, questions about what's going on here. So, no, I mean, that's the thing to have, again, just to use this small sample size, to have Peters, a consistent winner, if not at least guy that's getting mentioned, and then to have Sosna, I knew he had positive vibes. He was at USC as like a 28, 29-year-old. Then he goes to Detroit. He's only 31 now. And to hear some of these agents really praise him, he was like the Lions contract guy last year. He's in charge of the Commanders' football ops, and he's overseeing other things like at the analytics. There's a lot that goes into that as a thinker, as a person, as a communicator. And, based on what you've heard from these agents, I don't imagine it'll be too long before Sosna gets an opportunity to get his own shop to run.
Ben Standig with us here on the Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Non-commander stuff in this survey, Ben. One of the most interesting sets of answers that I found was the Hard Knocks section on the Giants. Most of the agents said this was terrible for the Giants. I thought it was really interesting because in talking to some people who cover the team, like our guy Sean Mraz up in New York for WFAN, he's like, people are kind of hating on Joe Schoen, but Joe Schoen is actually doing the correct stuff here. It's everyone else in the room who needs an adjustment. And so to hear all these agents be like, man, that's not a great look for Schoen. Even some of them saying I didn't think it was a good look for the Giants, but I actually like Schoen as a GM. Do you think that they're right that this will actually affect how teams handle Hard Knocks, especially the offseason version in the future? Or is this a bunch of agents, just spouting off hot takes, pretending that, I don't know, they have my job?
Yeah, well, look, when we watch the regular Hard Knocks, which to me I've kind of bailed on a few years ago, it was a really interesting concept, and now it's watered down. Every team kind of has some version. But generally speaking, the interesting thing there was we weren't really seeing the game plan, right? We weren't seeing how the coaches were kind of really choosing how they were going to run the team. There was a lot of personal profiles and some interesting conversations along the way. This was much more in the weeds in terms of the actual art of free agency and the draft and putting a team together and negotiating. I mean, that Joe Schoen, Saquon Barkley conversation before Barkley decides to go to Philly, I mean, it was pretty fascinating to see a GM and a player, have the conversation we've all always wondered about. What are you going to do? You're going to let us know, what have you. And then not to mention, they're talking to quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels included, before they're deciding what to do. They're debating to trade up or stay here, et cetera. So I think that was all really interesting. I liked it, but at the same time, it's much more. It's showing really kind of how the sausage is made where the regular Hard Knocks doesn't. And I can imagine a lot of teams are kind of like, I don't know. Do we really want to show what we're doing here? Now, obviously it's happening way after the fact, so it's not like it costs them in terms of the draft or free agency. But I definitely do wonder if teams are going to, won't be willing to do that going forward, even though, like I said, I found it fascinating. I think the other thing I do wonder is, the genius term gets thrown around a ton, when it comes to this league, whether it's play callers or sometimes talent evaluators. And the one thing that struck me watching that, I'm not saying the conversations and debates weren't interesting, but in a lot of cases, they weren't very dissimilar to the ones that we all kind of have.
Right.
And I know we only saw a snippet of it. There are obviously a lot more hours in the day we don't see. And that's the thing. Like, there's only, they're not splitting the atom. This isn't like watching Oppenheimer trying to figure out, how do you make an atomic bomb work and what do you do with it? This is like, well, do we spend this much on a running back? Do we trade up? Do we like this guy? Do we like this kid's answers? It's same thing we always kind of do. So I think that it pulled back the curtain in a fun way, I think, for us, but it also, I think, made the whole process seem a little more generic than for some people would think, and that's perhaps why it's also not ideal, because it doesn't make everybody look as brainiac as perhaps the perception is.
Right. No, I think that's a great point, because I think, to your point and how much gets cut, like, I think probably some fans walk away thinking that's the entire process, and it's not. Like, they lay out on they laid out a bunch of headlines, and then off camera, they're writing the story. And I think that part is really important to point out. And if there was a way to provide just an ounce of that kind of insight, and I feel like they did it sometimes. I mean, the Giants, the Bears are getting criticized right now for exercising a lot of editorial control over Hard Knocks, and they're, it just kind of became this almost like propaganda-y type of thing for the Bears, and they seem to not let any real drama out. They didn't do a lot of stuff beyond Caleb in terms of personal interest stories, even to the extent that they've done in other Hard Knock seasons. And for the Giants, like, it felt like they went about as far as they could in letting the cameras in and letting stuff stay in the show. And I do wonder if other league executives are like, I don't want people to think that that's what we do, because what we do is so much deeper than this surface level stuff, and we can't give away the secrets. And then, we already deal with every fan in America thinking that they could do our job anyway. And all this does is cement that, because they forget all the stuff that winds up on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, it's basically like every person in those rooms already, read the information, watched the film, assessed what they did, and then they come into the conversation with everybody having a baseline that's higher than what we all can see, and then have the basic chat of what do they think. It's not the deeper details of, intricacies of what the wide receiver on tape is doing, or how the cornerback reacts to this or that, whatever it might be. And then, even things like the salary cap, it's not just, boy, it'll cost a lot of money. Well, it's really digging into how things could potentially work and so on. So, yes, it's a simplistic look at the situation, but like you said, they pushed it seemingly about as far as they could, and that was just that's enough to be intriguing, and to maybe, like you said, to have people think they know more than what's really being shown.
Last thing for Ben Standig here on the Hoffman Show. You closed out with kind of an open-ended, like, wish list question. If given the power, what's the one change in the NFL universe you would make? You took guaranteed salaries and eliminating the franchise tag off the table, because that would be most agents' number one request. Was there any of these proposals that you really liked and or you think actually has a chance of becoming reality, let's say, in the next 5 years?
Well, they talked, a lot of them just said, hey, you got to get rid of the artificial, anything that's like not pure grass fields, you got to get rid of that for player safety. The one that always drives me crazy is, it's one thing to have the extra games now at 17, it'll likely be 18, but when they make teams play like on a Sunday night and then on a Thursday, that type of stuff just is crazy. And if they're going to go to 18 games, are they going to put in a second bye? If you don't, then I think that's, gets pretty outlandish in terms of claiming you're worrying about player safety. And that's something that a lot of these agents, talk about. Like there was a different question about, are you cool if the league goes to 18 games? And a lot of them were like, yeah, but in part because it means more money for everybody involved.
Sure.
But it's like, yes, but only if there is that second bye, or like someone suggested, no buys until week 7. That way, teams get, you don't need really a bye after week 4, right? In theory. So, if they do the right things around the notion of player safety, then I think a lot of this could work and make sense. But that's, I think, been the rub for a lot of agents and the players, is that you can't just keep adding these games and then have teams playing on a Sunday night and then Thursday. Like that, it's just bad for the product, for not even just the health of the players. It just makes for a lesser product. So I think that was something, those are the type of things that stood out. And, there's some other interesting ones, like every guaranteed contract under 3 years. Every contract with 3 years or less should be guaranteed. Okay, I think that's an interesting notion, right? I mean, the Commanders just signed, an army of players on 1-year deals. Should those be guaranteed, as opposed to a 4-year deal that's only somewhat? I don't know. That's interesting. Anything to help sort of the players who have this very short window to play and make money, I think can make a lot of sense. But I think those are and of course the agents are going to be on the player side. Let's just be clear about that. I think some of those were the ones that were interesting, but there was a bunch of other ones for sure.
For sure. We could do probably a couple of shows just on the entirety of topics in this. There's so much good stuff in here. And if we had you in for it, we could probably make a whole week out of shows, because I'm sure that there's stuff they got left on the cutting room floor. You can read Ben Standig's 6th annual NFL agent survey in The Athletic. And of course, we'll be talking to Ben as Kevin Sheehan does, as Russell does, all season long. You'll be hearing him here on the Team 980 as the Commanders get going a week from Sunday in Tampa. Ben, enjoy your final non-NFL football weekend, my friend.
Oh, boy.
It's here.
Phrase like that, I got a lot of resting to do here, but unfortunately I got a lot of work to do, so we'll see. But I appreciate it, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. That's Ben Standig, everybody, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Of course, Commanders beat reporter for The Athletic. When we get back, Logan got going on Take Command about the Commanders' offensive line situation. You got to hear this discussion, and we'll talk about it next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And our football coverage is presented by T-Mobile. Switch to T-Mobile and you can get tons of benefits and still save on every plan versus AT&T and Verizon. Use their savings calculator to find out how at T-Mobile.com/switch. Sometimes when we're recording Take Command, I surprise Logan with something, or Logan surprises me with something, and we get going on some kind of tangent. And that's what happened when we started talking about the offensive line this week. We were doing our 53-player roster breakdown, and we're going position group by position group. And as we started to talk about the offensive line, I brought up, as you'll hear, a couple of points that I heard made by Derek Klassenberg and Robert Mays on the Athletic Football Show. And these are ones that have been made by plenty of other podcast hosts. I just happen to be listening to Derek and Robert's NFC East previews, and they do a really great job. They're two really smart guys. Robert's a friend. Like, I'm not here to bash those guys, but I do think that they were off on something in regards to the Commanders' O-line. And let's just say Logan agreed. You got to hear this, and then we'll talk about it on the back end. This is from the Take Command podcast with me and Paulson. On the offensive line, Logan, no major surprises here. Brandon Coleman, Nick Allegretti, Tyler Biadasz, Sam Cosmi, Andrew Wiley, Cornelius Lucas, Trent Scott. I think it was almost, we just didn't know what the injury status was there. So as we made some predictions, or said like, oh, did he make it? But turns out Scott's still there as the fourth tackle. Michael Dieter, and then Chris Paul. And I think Chris Paul is also the kind of interesting one when you talk about Scott, because we thought maybe he had surpassed him on the tackle depth chart, and that made Trent Scott expendable. Julian Good-Jones, the only offensive lineman they wind up keeping on the practice squad, so I think that's interesting as well. They could obviously add and swap some guys out.
Did they not sign Ricky Stromberg? I thought he was on there too. It might have changed. Obviously.
I do not see Stromberg on the initial release. I can look that up real quick. Okay. But yeah, so what do we make of this offensive line group, where we're worried and where we feel pretty good?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the group we kind of thought it was going to be. You know what I mean? Like, approximately this. I think the Trent Scott thing makes sense because they don't know where Coleman's at. And if you're not sure where Coleman's at, you still need to make sure you've got a swing guy that can do both. And Scott has shown that he can do that. He showed that last year. So I think the main thing is, like, where's Coleman at in his development? Will he play week one? I don't know. I don't know if I'd feel super comfortable throwing a rookie in versus that Todd Bowles defense and how much they pressure. But if you feel like he's ready to go, maybe you're rotating series or doing something like that, or maybe you pick a softer landing point in terms of getting him in there. But I think those tackles, they make a lot of sense. I mean, that's kind of what we thought it was going to be from very early in the offseason. The interior honestly feels kind of the same way. You know, like I don't think there's really any surprises there. They go Dieter, even though he didn't like blow the doors off preseason. But again, like none of those other guys, Ricky Stromberg, Julian Good-Jones, like made a push to say that they need to be on the team over him. And I think Chris Paul, I'm happy to see that, because I think early on it looked like he was going to have a difficult time making the roster, but he just kept plugging away. And I think that's a very deserved spot for him. So very happy for him that he's in there.
Yeah, for sure. And Stromberg, not on the practice squad. In fact, he's not currently on anyone's practice squad.
Okay.
A lot of Bears fans are clamoring, saying, gotta go get him. Like, yeah. Okay. You have fun with that, Chicago. Wish Ricky the best. But yeah, so I agree. I think this is a group that potentially could evolve throughout the year. It's one that I expect them to put a lot more resources in next year, and they are just going to have to be cognizant of what they are right now, which is better than I think some people think. Like, I was listening to the NFC East preview on the Athletic Football Show yesterday, and Derek Klassenberg, who I like a lot, just crushed them. They're like, oh my God, he's like, are they going to be 2023 Giants bad? And I was like, there's just no way that is the case.
I will say they're not very deep. The depth is a little bit of a concern. So if there's an injury, maybe they kind of drift into that territory. But I think when you look at, and this is like really nerdy stuff, you know, like there's the analytics of offensive line play. And last year, obviously, they weren't good. But when you watch down to down, like turn on the film, watch it. Yes. And you're watching 5-step drops, down in and down out. Like, so I think I've said this before on the podcast. I remember being in meetings with Kyle, and he's like, I don't want a 5-step drop more than 5 times in a game. And we were doing it upwards of 35 times last year. you are exposing that group to so much difficulty and challenge. And when I watched them, I was like, they're actually in these reps when the defense knows. That's the other thing. When the defense knows it's a passing down, you're basically giving them all the advantage. And we were doing that every single play. And for them to be as consistent as they were, I was like, oh my gosh, like this group is, I know they're much maligned statistically, but they're playing better than the numbers would indicate. And it's kind of like interesting because you go back 2 years, 3 years, and they were like the darlings statistically. It was like, this is one of the best offensive lines in the country, blah, 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 blah. But when you watch it down to down, they weren't as good as they appeared. So when you watch the film, I think, everyone gets on Wiley as being this, like he was fine last year. And I think if you are able to deleverage them and go from 35 times to 15 times, which is a much more reasonable number in terms of 5-step drop pass protection, because you're going to have quick game, you're going to have screens. I'm not saying throw the ball 15 times. This group will play better. Statistically, they'll play better. So, again, that's where it comes down to with them specifically, Cliff and this offensive staff, and saying like, and I think in the preseason you've seen they've done a really good job. Like, have we even talked that Chris Paul started a game at right tackle after playing guard for the entire preseason?
Right, protecting Jaden Daniels, by the way, not just Jeff Driscoll.
And we didn't even talk about him. There was no pressure because we understood the ball needed to get out. We ran the football effectively. It's ridiculous, but you can insulate the offensive line, and you have to. And so I think when you look at the best offenses in the league right now, they have good offensive lines like Detroit, San Francisco, Kansas City, but they insulate that group a ton. They like the play callers there are excellent. So I think
so does the quarterback, and that's
yes.
the other part of it that we've talked about in the past. That like sacks are a quarterback stat. Like if it's one thing to 5-step drop and stand there and pat the football, it's another thing to hit your 5th step and launch one down the field to Terry McLaurin. And Jaden Daniels is going to do that, and that is one of the. I'm not going to call it a concern, but the questions that I have is like, do they insulate Jaden so much that they don't let him use what is his number one superpower, throwing the deep ball? But I think Cliff is going to balance that. And I think that they'll set up stuff where like they have these slot fades that he can throw, and he throws as well as anybody from day one, but they're easy reads. And if it's shut down, then he knows where to go. And so, there's a lot of questions for sure about this offensive line. And the fact that we still don't know who's going to start at left tackle should be said out loud to acknowledge the fact that, there is not like some stacked group. But I do think that if you're just looking at data based off last year, that data needs a ton of context. And I think you just did a really good job of providing said context.
Yeah, and I think the other thing this is a great point, and you brought this up, is the one thing Jaden Daniels, I think I slept on in the draft evaluation, but I was doing a film breakdown with Coach yesterday, and we were watching a couple plays that I picked, and he goes, the thing I love about him is he can accelerate his process immediately. So there's that play against Miami where it looks like man coverage, and they rotate to cover 2, and they're bringing in this fire zone, and he's supposed to work to the right, but he's working to the left, and he can tell right away that he screwed it up. And you're like, that would have been a sack fumble last year because he's got 2 free runners off the right side. He's looking to the left. He can't even see them. But his footwork was so good. Ball out. And it was like...
Yeah, the one that he threw out of bounds over Terry's head?
Yes. Like, I know I know he made a mistake. But the physical ability to say, oh, I did screw it up, and get my feet where I got to get him to get this ball out before the rush is even past the line of scrimmage, I thought, man, like that's going to save you 10 sacks this year, 15 sacks, like just from that physical ability of the quarterback.
So that from Take Command. If you want more of our breakdown of the roster and more from Logan, obviously check out the Take Command podcast, wherever you get yours. And I thought that was really interesting, and I'm glad Logan did that, because I think really quickly we're going to know whether Logan's theory of the case is right, which I think it is, or whether maybe this offensive line is actually way worse. And one thing that I thought, we did never read the comments yesterday, and there was someone who was like, the Commanders roster is even worse than it was last year on the O-line. And I was like, you think Tyler Biadasz is worse than Nick Gates? Like, what did you watch? Tyler Biadasz was a starter for the Cowboys last year on a great O-line, and Nick Gates was here. That seems to matter. Left guard last year, okay, if you want to say Allegretti is not that much different than Chris Paul and Sadiq Charles and whoever else rotated in there last year, fine. Cosme should be better this year than last year because he's another year better. Wiley is Wiley. And then, okay, Charles Leno at left tackle versus Brandon Coleman. Like, I know Leno wasn't anyone's favorite, but he was solid, and there were some numbers that suggested in some aspects he was actually really good. But I think that the last part is the most important. Like, offensive line play is quarterback and scheme dependent more than it is the actual players themselves, unless they are so heinously bad or so absurdly good that they can overcome the quarterback and the scheme. In other words, if you put me at left tackle, it doesn't matter what scheme or what quarterback, he gonna die, and that scheme ain't gonna work because I cannot play NFL left tackle. If you put Trent Williams in a bad scheme with a quarterback who pats the football, well, you're still probably going to get some yards that you shouldn't get because that dude's still, dude across from Trent Williams isn't beating Trent Williams because he's Trent Williams, and that's what greatness does. But by and large, like, it comes down to, do you have answers in your scheme to deal with pressure, either pre-snap by adjusting protections and all that kind of stuff, or post-snap by hot reads or easy stuff built in, check downs that are available immediately, and a quarterback who can process all of that. A quarterback who understands where pressure's coming from, what he's got to do with it, etc. And I just think the difference is in the scheme, Cliff being quarterback friendly, Eric being extremely not quarterback friendly, unless your quarterback is Patrick Mahomes and he can handle an absurd amount of information, data, etc. And Andy Reid, by the way, also has a lot to do with that. It certainly appears. But, Eric's theory of the case with Sam Howell, who is not up to speed, and Cliff's theory of the case with Jaden Daniels, who, even though he hasn't actually played an NFL snap yet, seems to be very up to speed. Like, it's a different test that they have to take this year. And thus, to continue that analogy, Ant, I think the grade's going to be pretty different.
I think it's going to be substantially different as well. But also, I think I saw some graphic that said the Commanders' pass block grade actually wasn't as bad as, it was made out to be, or, the narrative that was driven around it. So, and also, bringing in Cliff and, a more mobile quarterback, I definitely think it's going to be substantially different. And I don't think we're going to have the same, thoughts as we did on our offensive line as we did last year. But to, a lot of fans' point, I would have loved to, see some of those guys, build some continuity over the preseason. But, we didn't have that. So I think we just got to go with it. Yeah.
Coleman was hurt. There's nothing you can do about that. And, I've yet to hear a good answer to, oh, they should have done more in the offseason. Okay, what should they have done? There's not a good answer because they used their first-round pick on a left tackle. They could have gotten a second-round pick on, they used their first-round pick on a quarterback. Second-round pick, they used on a defensive tackle, fine, but they could have used it on a left tackle who probably isn't that much different than Brandon Coleman, who they used their third-round pick on. Like, what are we talking about? And there's a lot of people that think that Brandon Coleman might be better than some of those dudes who went in the second round around that range. And then you got to punt on Sainer still and, the other guys that they took in that second round, and Johnny Newton, who could be like a Pro Bowl level player if things turn out properly for him in the eyes of some. So I get it. But I think it just comes down to two main points that Logan made, which is why we wanted to play that here on the radio, which is, one, if you take the number of dropbacks from 35 to 15 and keep the ratios all the same, which is actually not even how that works because now you're a more balanced offense. The defense is more off guard. They can't sit on stuff. But if you were to just keep all that the same, pretend like there's no schematic difference in 35 and 15 dropbacks. If, let's say, you even lose 50% of the time, which is not the actual number, but just for easy math, at 35, you're losing 17 to 18 times a game. At 15 dropbacks, you're losing 7 to 8. Like, that alone really matters. And then, like Logan said, the example from the preseason, and we'll talk about this more with Nate Tice coming up at 6 o'clock, of how Jaden's able to avoid some of this stuff, not just because he can run with his legs, but like that play in the preseason where he threw it out of bounds over Terry's head, he realized that he got himself in a bad way, and instead of turtling or trying to extend and make a play and, wind up taking a huge hit and a sack, he just throws the ball out of bounds. He actually tried to throw it where Terry almost had a chance, and he just overthrew it a little bit. But he also knew, I'm throwing into bad coverage here. I'm just going to throw it out of bounds. And he did. And, it sucks because you'd rather have a good play than an incompletion thrown out of bounds. But an incompletion thrown out of bounds is way better than a sack fumble. And so that is the kind of difference that a quarterback can make, and why sacks are often a quarterback stat, not something that's actually indicative of how an offensive line is playing down in, down out. All right, when we get back, I'm an upset customer, and I'm going to let it out a little bit on the radio. The Hoffman Show on Team 980. Nate Tice, Yahoo Sports, NFL Network, is going to join us coming up at 6 o'clock. The NFL Trends of the Year is the topic. Looking forward to talking with Nate about that and what he's seen from Jaden Daniels so far. If you don't know, Nate's the son of Mike Tice, the former Vikings coach, but he played a quarterback at Wisconsin. He actually backed up Russell Wilson and then was a coach and scout before getting into the media world, and has been a rising star and nice enough to spend some time with us in the 6 o'clock hour today. So, Anthony, I've debated whether or not to take this public, if you will, but I think I've passed a deadline where I am now justified in being a whiny person. I haven't had gas in my house since Wednesday, and I'm pretty mad about it.
You're talking about the gas that allows you to cook.
That's
gas
right.
that
fuels our hot water heater.
Oh my gosh.
And we have whatever hot water was in the heater, we've run out. So we're now in cold shower mode. And
that's concerning.
Tuesday night is when this actually happened. We woke up to the news Wednesday morning, or maybe it was Monday night and we woke up Tuesday. Either way, it's been a long time. And basically, apparently what happened is we live in like a condo building, so we're not in control of this. In one of the common areas, this affected multiple units in our condo building. There was a connector that came loose, and one of our neighbors smelled gas, and obviously safety first, turn off the gas, and then let's get that thing fixed. Well, apparently, Washington Gas will come and turn off the gas, but they don't fix the stuff. So then we had to have the building call a tech to come out. It took forever to get the tech out. But we were told by Washington Gas, as soon as the tech comes out, call us, and same day we'll come turn on your gas. Well, we found out, I think it was yesterday morning, that finally it got fixed late Wednesday night. Thursday morning, early, I'm on the phone with Washington Gas, and I'm like, hey, they fixed the thing. Can you come out and fix our stuff? And lo and behold, nope. Sorry, you're going to have to wait till tomorrow. And so they tell us, okay, you're going to have to wait till tomorrow. And then it is they say the window is 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Like, that's a reasonable thing for us to just put our lives on hold. Not, hey, can you pick a 3-hour window even between 7 and 5? You got to be available 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. today to get the gas turned on. Well, Anthony, it's 5:53. We don't have gas yet.
Wow.
So I called this afternoon. It was like 2 o'clock, and I was like, hey, can you give us an ETA? Can you give us an anything? Can you maybe escalate this, since you told us on Wednesday that it'd be a same-day bit, and it's now Friday, and nothing. And they're like, we can't do that. Like, can you tell us an ETA? No, sorry, we can't give you an ETA. It's sometime between 7 and 5. And actually, our technicians, this was the first time they told me this, our technicians work until 9, so it might actually be after 5. I don't go ahead. If you have something intelligent to say, go ahead, because I got nothing.
I don't have anything intelligent to say. I was more so going to side with you and your frustration, because that is like,
what kind of customer service policy is that? Like, and the thing that I think, like, I don't want to get on too much of a high horse here, because then you just become a guy complaining on the radio. But like, this is utilities. Like, it's not like we could choose. This is not subject to the market factors of capitalism, right? It's not like I can be like, hey, you guys suck, I'm going to go to your competitor. If like Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile or whoever my wireless person is, like, starts dropping calls like crazy, I'd be like, hey, you suck, I'm going to cancel. I wouldn't actually do that, by the way. Be nice to customer service people. It's like they're enforcing terrible policies. Be mean to their bosses. Just kidding. Treat everyone like a person. But I'd be like, hey, we're unhappy with the service. We're going to go somewhere else, and we'll pay someone else money. We don't have that option. We're just screwed for something that we kind of need to live. Because Yeah, did people live without gas for a long time? But their lives were set up that way. When you're living in the teepee, you build a fire. When you live in a home with a gas-powered hot water heater, you don't plan on having to heat your water. And by the way, we can't even heat our water because we'd have to do it on our stove, which is powered by gas.
God dang. So hopefully this gets taken care of.
If this doesn't get taken
The
care of
next
tonight,
3 hours.
I don't know what I'm going to do because, like, what recourse do I have? Apparently calling, and this is my favorite part, Anthony. My absolute favorite part of this. This is too stupid to make up. Guess what Washington Gas calls their customer service reps? They call them customer advocates. Customer advocates that do zero advocating for their customers and tell them, I'm sorry, there's nothing. I'm so sorry about that. Call them customer apologizers tours.
Apologist.
They're not really apologists. I don't know. Just call them punching bags. Because, like, I do try to be nice to customer service folks because I realize they're stuck. And I'll, like, even if it's like, hey, can you please make a note of this for your supervisors or the people who make up your policy because, like, this is dumb. And they'll often go, yes, I will, because I'm sorry that you're having to go through this. And I'm like, I'm sure you are. But to call them customer advocates and not let them actually advocate for the customers. Chef's kiss, Washington Gas. Get your butt out here and please turn my gas back on. I'd like to be able to take a hot shower and cook dinner. When we get back on the Hoffman Show, no more silly ranting by me about my living predicaments and my home predicaments. Nope, you get really smart football talk with Nate Tice. That's next on the Team 980. Us today from Yahoo Sports and the NFL Network. Is that why you wanted to do this on Friday? Is so that you could tell everybody that you're going to be on the NFL Network this year, Nate Tice?
That's it. It was, I had to sit on that for like 6 weeks, more than that. And it's just, and I kept going like, this is still happening, right? Like you guys just like, oh no, but
signed the thing. Yeah.
I did it. Yeah. I did the whole thing. Or is that just some rando that was it MFL or something that sent me that email? Yeah, no, no, I'm very, very excited. I'm glad it finally cat's out of the bag with it. It's pretty fired up. I'm also more keen on doing more cardio now because the cameras
be
do it.
on
the cameras
television.
do add 10
As
to
someone who
15 pounds.
works in the sports performance weightlifting world, lift weights. Don't worry about the cardio. Just
Weights.
a little bit more. Get the muscles
It's my
going.
jowl. I have the jowl check. It's like every day. That's how I can always
Chest and shoulders.
I
It'll
carry it right
shape
here.
everything up. That's my. Let's get some
I
overhead
do need to do
presses in.
shoulders. As someone that's went from like mostly lifting in my life, former playing days, with some healthy cardio to mostly cardio, which is a little lifting. It's weird to see how clothes fit me differently because my shoulders just aren't as
You
broad.
no longer have to be quarterback sized.
Yeah, and the weight from it's the same weight, it's just different shape now.
Yeah.
It went from healthy and like my glutes to just to my gut now, and it's same way. Everyone's like, what do you weigh now? Same weight, 230, 228. Doesn't
Just
look
a little
like
different.
it.
Just a little different.
You look skinnier though. It's like yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. But
Thanks. So Nate, and we'll see how the shoulder workouts go. He'll be on the NFL Network this season.
Well, sorry, short. NFL Network.
He'll be on the NFL Network, and of course, you can catch him. All the work he's doing at Yahoo Sports. I've known Nate for about a year now. Had him on a bunch in the draft process. We had him on Take Command. It was great to be with him out in Vegas, Super Bowl, and doing stuff out there on Radio Row and Combine and the whole deal. So great to have Nate back on the show. We're going to do basically Nate's favorite stuff today. We're going to talk about quarterbacks, and then we're going to talk a little scheme because Nate has been doing some work on kind of the scheme trends in 2024. And so I want to see where Cliff Kingsbury's offense and Joe Witt's defense fit in those. But we have now seen Jayden Daniels in preseason. I've obviously gotten a chance to see him a ton in training camp. I'm curious what you have seen from Jayden and how that contrasts with kind of what you thought he was coming out. The sample size is still very small, but what have you seen from Jayden Daniels so far?
Yeah, I gotta be honest. Actually, when I talked to you guys at the combine, and you asked what quarterback would fit in Cliff's offense, I pride myself on always having some answer in my brain somewhere. It might take me a minute to get there, but I will have an answer. And that one of all the questions I probably got in the spring, I let it marinate for a while.
Yeah.
And now once I see this preseason happen, I'm like, oh, Jayden Daniels. This is a great fit. Even if to me, what some of the stuff Cliff does is not ideal of how I kind of want my NFL offenses. Everybody has just their own version of everything. He prides himself on quick game, 3-by-1 formations, meaning just, 3 guys to one side, an isolated receiver to one side, receiver staying on the same side, Terry on the left, and I believe Diami Brown was on the right for some of the time. I have like 2 shares of Diami Brown still somewhere, and I'm pretty happy that he's getting some playing time. But
yeah,
is you see Jayden Daniels, it allows him to operate quickly. These are all concepts he's run like a million times before. This is what people were saying, oh, he's the most pro prepared. And I kind of follow, I always kind of fight that stigma a little bit because like people are saying that about Bo Nix because he's older too. And then I watch him, I'm like, he's missing like easy reads.
I think people say that about guys who are closer to their ceiling. It's like, oh, he's the most pro ready. And it's like, okay, he has the least amount to grow. Yes. And I think that's the fun thing about Jayden is I think he is both actually what it should mean to be pro ready and also has room to grow.
It's his maturity. Everything is calm. Like, and I think everyone keeps saying that. Everyone says it's palpable. Even when I just watch him on film, everything is calm. He's handling protections or at least is aware of them, of what like play changes and everything. And these are just things I'm reading between the lines when I'm watching him in the preseason. He changed the one vertical play he had this preseason. When I could tell he went rogue there because going 5 verts out of empty is not usually in the normal play menu there, but that shows the confidence he has. He's like, I know what to do here. Right or wrong, he's doing it fast. And I'd much rather have that than someone that I could tell their head is spinning. And so whether there's how much ceiling there is to tap in this offense, we'll see. I think that's what happened with Cliff with Kyler Murray. They kind of reached their limit together. is Jaden going to be different? I think there's different possibilities with Jaden because of his accuracy, because of what I think Cliff likes to do. He wants to be quick, fast. Whether it's 10 personnel with 4 receivers, whether it's bubbles and flats, whether it's crossers, Daniels fits that perfectly with the occasional deep shot. So I just kind of was like, yeah, real long-winded way to say that I finally have an answer to your question back from late February that I've been thinking on for about 5 months now. I want you to know that. That's seriously
the old 5-month-long interview. I didn't know it was still ongoing. Here we go. All right, well, that's it for Nate. We'll see you guys.
Dot, and then this is the following ellipses. To get
I love it. I love it. The thing that I've mentioned this a couple of times on the show, and people are like, "We get it. You had Orlovsky on the week of the draft, and he told you this." But one thing that Dan said was that he thought Jaden's eyes were the best in the draft, and that was something that I hadn't heard a ton of yet to that point for all of the draft work that we had done and all the different people that we interviewed. And I think we've seen that in the preseason. And I'm curious if that is something that you saw in the process, or maybe you think of differently now, because I think my question always was, okay, some of the stuff that people say he can't do, is it can't do, or is he not doing it because he had Neighbors and Brian Thomas, and like, why would you throw over the middle when those two dudes are outside? The talent disparity was just so wide. It's like, what do? You throw a touchdown to the Brian Dable Hard Knocks clip, right? But now we see that there's a lot more meat on that bone, and at least in what I've seen in training camp. I'm curious what you've seen in terms of his processing and some of the things that were maybe question marks that have been answered so far in this preseason.
Yeah, I think with Dan and I would agree, and we all articulate it differently, and then like for me, and this is what it's also like I could have a whole article about this too, about like how people, okay, it's called this, and it's like, well, there's 5 different ways to call the same thing. When I was saying kind of like calm and confident, that's eyes is kind of a part of that as well. Like that's knowing where to go, looking at the deep safety, looking at going 1 to 2 on some concepts. Why you felt so many like maybe hitches and stuff on the outside, and even if that was a complaint, I would say, yeah, a knock I had him coming out of college was that's the offense, is they have a 3-man concept on one side, and then they play iso ball with the lone receiver. You have to have dudes to do that. Terry, at the very least, can do it, and we'll see with Brown and Zacchaeus, who's like a folk hero to me. So it's great to see that he's getting some run. But whoever it is going to be on the outside, I think it is Diami Brown. But is that okay? Their read is if I get single high, I can take that if I like it. So if I think I have some bad corner on one of these guys, all right, just take it all day. So it is good that he's boom, and that's the eyes element of that he's confident, sees that he's got single high, confirms it, and goes to that isolated read. I would say the one time he got caught this preseason was against the Dolphins, and they threw a knuckleball at him, and it was the one where he kind of threw that fade to nobody to the outside. It wasn't to nobody, but he
threw it over Terry's head out of bounds.
Over his head. It was because
he wound up working the wrong side of the field.
He realized he misread it, and he was like, all right, that's digging it, getting rid of it, burning it, whatever you want to say. And that was just getting caught. And that's, again, I got to see that once it's week 3, week 4, week 1 against Todd Bowles, because that's the NFL difference, is those third down plays where you get the craziest stuff you've ever seen in your life, and you just have to find a read. So I'm kind of talking about both sides of my mouth, where it's like the stuff that he is confident in, which I think is a good portion of this offense, what it's going to be. Eyes are great. Confidence is great. And again, it's palpable. Like if you're a teammate and you're like just trying to learn, okay, but if the quarterback is like, hey, you got this. Hey, I know this. Hey, you were wrong here. That helps everybody out. That's a booster effect on everybody else. It's just that I still have to see the third down stuff, the crazy blitz stuff, whether he hangs in the pocket, still remains to see that. But he has answers, and it's cool to see a young guy have answers so early. And actually, and I'll just say like about other quarterbacks in this class is like, I've been pretty impressed, even in guys like Nix or Penix, who I was lower on, is JJ McCarthy as well, is that all those guys have handled their offenses in a mature way. And it's been really cool to see. And you never know if that's a blip of this class or if this is a trend with just quarterbacks in general, but it's just that that's been, if 2 or 3 of these guys hit, it's great for the NFL, because it's been really cool to see how mature all these guys are. So even the younger guys like May and Caleb Williams too.
For sure. Nate Tice, Yahoo Sports, NFL Network, with us here on the Hoffman Show. And the one reservation that I'm kind of keeping in my back pocket is a just in case for all these guys is has the preseason just gotten so freaking vanilla that nothing, like, this is all fool's gold. And it's not going to be fool's gold for all of them. Some of these guys are going to be great. I'm pretty sure of that. And it definitely looks like there is a command and a control for, like you said, pretty much every single one of these first round, these 6 guys.
Yeah.
But it's also a lot easier to have command, calm, control when you're not actually getting anything sophisticated thrown at you. And none of the highest caliber players in the league are on the other side.
And that's why that third down against the Dolphins is like, I have to mention that because that was the most real look that he saw.
Right, for sure. But I will say, Logan does a show with DQ, and he taped it yesterday, and we were talking about it on our podcast after he had taped it, and he said that was actually like one of their favorite plays to talk about because Daniels realized he made the mistake so quickly and made sure it didn't become a catastrophic mistake. And that is a huge thing for quarterbacks. I remember when Cousins went through this. He went from his mistakes being incompletions or interceptions to incompletions. And it's like, we can live with incompletions.
That's it. It's you can't make a bad play worse. That is the ultimate NFL quarterback adage. It's, hey, if it's a bot snap, just get on the ball. Hey, if a guy ran a wrong route, dig it or check it down. Don't go, hey, get mad and try to force it in there. And that's why I want to bring up that play was that he dug it.
Right.
I keep using that term, but threw it away. But I don't want to say it's like, oh, threw it away in a bad way. He got away. He also moved away from a pressure on that. I think a guy was coming free on him. And again, that's what the growth I want to see with Daniels is that it's working to throw as opposed to just immediately going to scramble mode. That's going to be key to him have a successful long career. And again, these are the little things you try to take away from these preseason games. It's not the stats. It's not, just one, like the highlight go ball throws. It's just these little in between minutia things. And again, it's been positive for Daniels and I think a couple other guys too.
Nate's going to stick with us. And after the break, we're going to get into his trends of 2024 in the NFL and how the Commanders fit in with them. Nate Tice with us on the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980 and always live as well on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And yeah, you can watch us on YouTube if you like at the Team 980 as we bring back in our pal Nate Tice, Yahoo Sports, and the NFL Network. Something that he's been working on, the scheme trends of 2024. Offensively, like, what do you think is, I feel like we're doing a fashion show. Hey, what's in this year, Nate? What's in 2024 for scheme and is some of the stuff that Cliff Kingsbury likes to do so to speak?
Yeah, what I would say with Cliff stuff is the run game stuff that was one of the highlights of those Cardinals offenses with and without Kyler Murray. Even just using other guys was the run game would be pretty creative because they'd be in spread formation so much that they kind of had to, and the use of personnel. I'm really high on John Bates, by the way. Like,
look, this will shock you, but Paulson loves that dude. A wide tight end that just mashes his face mask into people.
The son of a wide tight end, by the way.
Yes.
Me, like, yes. These are probably what I should have been, not a quarterback. But it's like that is talk about weight. I should have just bulked up. But oh my god, I thought he had a great preseason. I've been a fan of him, for a while. But like he's really coming to like he's like a weapon in the run game. So, but tight ends is kind of a trend. It's always a trend. But I think what's kind of I think coaches have become really understanding of limitations of these more receiving only tight ends, the 230, 245 pound types, and not going, hey, like old coaches used to just be like, why don't you block? We're going to run behind you. Why aren't you blocking this defensive end? Now coaches, Ben Johnson with Laporta last year is a great example. Dalton Kincaid with the Bills last year. These guys getting used as decoys, getting used in RPOs, getting used as arc blockers, getting used where they switch roles with the offensive linemen. So using tight ends in different ways and motion a ton is using them motion to block as opposed to motion just to pass and everything. That's kind of been a trend I've really seen. And I've seen just each kind of proliferating where coaches are getting more and more creative with it and going like, oh, let's try it with this. I think the Dolphins are a great example of that. The Cardinals are a great example of that. Kingsbury doesn't use a ton of motion, but the run game, newish run game that's kind of getting dripped in here, some college elements, he does do that, especially with the quarterback run game. We saw the touchdown with Jane Daniels against
whoever they played for, the Jets.
Oh, Jets, thank you. They all blend together. On that one, that's going to be a very popular run now. We've seen it in the NFL recently, but I think now because there's more running quarterbacks, more coaches that know how to block it up against real looks, I think that's a play you're going to see a ton of. I call it duo read, but I think there's different terms for it, but it's just an at you run. They're reading the front side defensive end. He crashes down. The quarterback keeps it. You saw it on the touchdown. Worked out perfectly. John Bates had an amazing block.
He sure did.
Had to give him a shout out on it. So I think that's one play that you'll see a lot is that quarterback run game. I want Jaden to get down still.
So do they, Nate.
My God, Dan Quinn on the one was so you can just tell he's like, golly, like why, man? I talked to him, but that whole stuff I feel like it's kind of passe to be like, oh, tight ends, but I think there is a element of how tight ends are being used. It's different than how Logan got used, where it's just down block
for sure.
Boom. It's more creative. Hey, block linebackers, block safeties, guys that are more the same build. So I just really like that. I'm trying to think defensively. And
I'll say real quick before we get to the defensive side. One thing that definitely caught my eye very early in this Commanders team building process, and this was actually the earliest because he was the first guy to sign. When Ertz was like, I'm in, I was like, oh,
yeah,
because for those that don't know, like Zach and obviously his wife, Julie, who just gave birth to twins, congrats to the Ertzes, like they are West Coast people. Like Julie, when she resumed her playing career, went to LA. Zach like moved to Phoenix for a reason to play for Arizona. And, he obviously went to Detroit, at the end of the year last year. And it's one thing if you're going to kind of chase a ring, but to the fact that they were like, nah, we'll up and move, especially if they knew at the time they had twins coming, to up and move to Washington, D.C., and make a commitment like that told me a lot about how Zach thinks of Cliff and Zach as a tight end thinks of Cliff. And so I think that is, talk about, hey, this is a guy that's not going to make me go block a defensive end. He's going to use me the way that I am best used. And he has been, I know you haven't really had a chance to see this because I didn't see you out at, I don't think you made your way out to Ashburn on any kind of a road trip. But yeah, we've gotten a chance to see it in practice, and Zach didn't play it in the preseason games. That dude is catching everything. He just knows how to get open. He's all over the place. So I'm really glad you brought up the tight ends thing because I think it is going to be a huge part of what they do that we haven't even fully seen yet, even if we saw enough for you to have a love affair with John Bates.
And I'm saying Ben Standig, right? And that is how you say his last name, right?
Sinnott.
God, see, I was right. That's the thing.
And then people corrected you.
People correct me. And I'm like, okay, they're correcting me. They sound confident.
Nope,
and
it's
I just
Senate,
follow the confidence. Okay.
Which works here in DC. It's close enough to Senate that it's just Senate. Yeah, that's the way I remember it because I'm a nerd, Nate.
The senator. Yeah, the senator. There we go. We just go
now we're going.
Yeah, now we're going. We go mythology. Even him who he's not a perfect tight end. He's not a perfect fullback. He's kind of a little bit do it all. I've kind of thought of him as like a real super version of Noah Gray, who's with the Chiefs, who does everything for the Chiefs. Hey, you're tight end this play. Hey, you're a blocking tight end. Hey, move around. Hey, split out. This offense is perfect for him because again, they're not going to ask him, hey, down block. Hey, kick out the DN. You already see him in preseason getting some creative looks too. So I really like this kind of this next wave of coaches. Cliff, I'll include with it, but guys that are kind of being more expansive with their stuff. Drew Petzing, the offense coordinator with the Cardinals, is another guy I'm very high on. And that's because he's doing the exact same stuff with it. They're going to have a bunch of tight end stuff with Trey McBride and Tip Ryman, who they drafted, and creatively using those guys and manipulating the defense and everything. So that whole, it's easier said than done. So it's nice to see guys actually doing it and then not just going, we're using tight ends, and then you never see them. So it's nice to actually see proof of concept. And again, the old Cardinals, new Cardinals, and now Washington, I think all handle it very well.
Yeah, and that's probably why they wind up keeping 4, by the way. But you want to get
Makes
Colson
sense, right?
excited. Fourth tight end out of UCLA, UDFA making the team. Let's go, Colson Yankoff. All right, Nate Tice from the NFL
They're talking
Network.
To you guys
and
too much.
Sports.
That's what it is. They're just getting influenced
They don't
by
listen
you guys.
to me, Nate. Good gracious. Come on. Don't make me reality check myself. So those are the offensive trends. What about the defensive side of the football? Nate Tice sticking with us here on the Hoffman Show for one more segment. Defensive trends and more. What's the tie that binds them all together? That's next here on the Team 980. brought to you by Floor & Decor. Unbeatable prices, unmatched in-stock selection. Floor & Decor has more styles of laminate, vinyl, tile, wood, and stone for anyone looking for the right look at the right price. Your next beautiful space is at Floor & Decor. Yahoo Sports, NFL Network, Nate Tice with us. All right, scheme trends defensively.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll see what twist that Joe Witt Jr. has as he's the DC. We know Dan Quinn is going to have a huge influence. But what are we seeing in the league? And then how does kind of the principles of what those guys do fit with what we think is working right now in the NFL?
You drafted a slot that matches what everyone else is doing right now. And oh my God, this is another one I've been corrected on. Mike Sainristil.
Sainristil.
Oh, God damn. But okay. See, I get so good with these names in April for the draft, and then they just
say your old colleague Brugler, that draft, the beast, the draft guide. That is my go-to. If I need a name pronunciation, just go in. Dane's got it all.
Dane's the best, and that is it really is a godsend. But he is a trend in himself. The guys that used to be tweeners, maybe they're not this. He's a do-it-all slot, and those guys that can blitz, can play man coverage, can just fit up in the run, even if they're not the biggest players in the world. That is a trend. Like everybody has to have a slot now because one, your main plays are going to be out of sub personnel, nickel and dime, so you need a fifth DB. And that fifth DB is going to be involved in a lot of plays. Probably going against this Washington offense, tackling bubbles and fitting up in the run and all these types of looks. So him in itself is a trend. And I would say, there's over 20 of these guys that are either first, second, or third years in the league that are the slots because this is what's happening in college right now. No, that's a fun position to watch. I would also say something that Dan Quinn evolved to in Dallas is becoming a trend, which is he was a Seattle guy. Cover one, cover three, cover one, cover three. That's all they did. Couple blitzes. Then he gets to Dallas and it's cover one, but then a lot of cover two and a lot of mix up and a lot of like funky looks out of cover two, different guys in different spots, different X's on the chalkboard, moving in different spots, but still getting the cover two. Some call that non-traditional two. I've been calling them unconventional two because I just want to use the acronym U2. And I think seriously, man, I get bored. I get bored in my office. I'm like, yeah, that works. U2. And that's I think is again proliferating throughout the league. That is a lot of people using funky looks and then getting to cover two, which is a safer coverage. That's coverage that makes quarterbacks work. So because they have to, to beat cover two, you either have to check it down over the middle of the field or push it on digs and benders and corners and big boy throws. So if you bring a funky simulated look, which is rushing four, but looking like a blitz, or bringing a blitz, or looking like you're bringing like a blitz and making the quarterback hold on to the ball that extra second, gets a pass rush home. Dan Quinn's already had that in his bag for the last couple of years in Dallas. And I think there's been some misconception that's like, oh, they ran man coverage every play because they're lazy. And there's some wildness to Dan Quinn's game, but he also was doing some really cool stuff with the cover two stuff. So I know he's going to have some influence on the plays, but I think that whoever's calling plays with Joe Witt and everything is that they're going to be running that because that's what I think a lot of teams are going to be leaning into a lot more this year, especially. So it's like, it's cover two is back. Zone runs are back, or not zone run. Duo is back. Like those plays, which is 2002 football, is back.
It's so cyclical.
It's tight ends. It's like, yeah, baby.
Which makes sense because like the league does something, you react. Now there's a new weakness to exploit. Offenses change. Defenses are like, oh, well, now we got to cover that. And eventually it just works its way in a circle of like, oh, we need bigger players, smaller players, bigger players, smaller players. Or we got to prevent, we're playing cover two. Okay, well, now the holes are here. We're going to play some more 3 and 1 and, trap and all these kinds of things. And the one thing that I will say, speaking of your old colleagues, Mays' interview with McVay was so good and so insightful. And Sean kind of verbalized something that I think has become the modus operandi of the league, which is explosives are king. Offensively, everything we're trying to do is figure out how to manufacture explosive plays. And defensively, we could play well on 97% of snaps, but if those 3% are explosive, we're going to lose, and we're going to lose by a lot. And so I think that part of this is those safer coverages, those two looks, whether it's two, whether it's quarters, deeper stuff down the field to prevent explosives is exactly that. Everyone's just trying to prevent explosives, and offensively, they're trying to figure out how can we get explosives. And some of the times it's in the run game too. Like, let's use these tight ends in creative ways to see if we can get someone on the second level, get that second block, and launch someone into the third level of the defense. These skilled running backs that we got, because there's too many of them in the league. But that, to me, like, it all, like, the principle at the center of all of this that is clearer than it's ever been is generate explosives offensively, prevent them defensively, and how you do that is going to change based off what the other one is doing.
What was his name? He's with New Mexico now. Rocky Long? No, Bronco. No, not Rocky
Bronco
Long.
Mendenhall?
Thank you. Yeah, Virginia.
Yes.
So obviously you have experience in the area around him. He did a clinic years ago, and this is all hearsay for me, so I might be butchering it. But Paul Christ, who's a big mentor for me, relayed this, and he said they think it's a win if you go to the spot they want you to, meaning the weakness of the coverage, meaning if it's cover 2, that's the check down. Or if it's cover 4, that's the 5 to 6 yard areas, like little hitch areas, or the flats, because he's saying, okay, we will let you nickel and dime. And so it's always the zag. Do what they don't want you to do. They don't want you to have explosives. Well, find every freaking way to get explosives. Don't fall into their hands of, okay, nickel and dime.
Basically, don't take what the defense gives you.
Yes, exactly. You want to lean into the punch. You want to do whatever idiom you want to use. You want to do the zag of what they want to do. And actually, that's a whole scheme thing too, is that once something becomes the meta, becomes the major of the entire league, well, then those types of players, that type of scheme becomes, it's a little too much. It becomes saturated. So then, this is the whole Seahawks thing of the 2010s was how they built the Legion of Boom. Well, we got Richard Sherman with long arms, and he's 6'3", and we got Bobby Wagner, who's too short for a lot of guys, but he had long arms and was fast. Like, you find the money ball of everything. But yeah, same. I think that line of thinking sometimes applies to, it's judo, I guess. Like if they're trying, throw with them, like you go against what they're trying to do. But to do that, you have to manufacture it with plays, which is either shot plays or it's a way to create yards after the catch. That's why I'm a big proponent of guys thrown over the middle. It's because that's the easiest area for it. Shanahan offenses can manufacture that as well. Or you got to have a dude at quarterback that's willing to launch some stuff. So again, this is why a lot of my thinking with quarterbacks is it's not the big arm of throwing it 60 yards, 70 yards. It's the arm that can drive it 22 yards on a straight line, on a missile. That's arm strength to me. Anyone can throw a deep ball. So guys like in this class that were all willing to throw benders and stuff, that's why it's like, that's going to be available, but you have to do it. Like, they want you to try and do it because not a lot of quarterbacks are willing to do it. So I don't know what metaphor is perfect for this. I'm going to go with judo. I think judo.
Sure.
Jiu-jitsu.
I don't know.
I live in the capital of MMA, and I should know this way better than I do.
Judo, you're throwing people. Jiu-jitsu, you're like striking people and then trying to choke them.
Yeah, maybe
so,
JJ.
Yeah,
I would say judo. I'll go with judo.
Okay,
it's
going with judo.
Leaning with it.
The one thing I will say on Jaden and Cliff and kind of where they fit into this, the one thing that I've really enjoyed from the preseason from them is kind of the situational awareness that they seem to have to the game, and that includes on third downs, like, let's get vertical. I hate, like, to your point, right? It's third and 12. Yeah, they're going to give you the 7-yard check down. And sometimes that's what you got to do. And you guys got to live with the kick. But like, they will try to find the vertical shots on third down, and especially depending on where they are in the area of the field. Like, yes, on a 3rd and 12 at the, let's call it the +40, we want the 7 yards because that's an easier field goal. And Jaden did that, the one opportunity that he had in the preseason. But if you're in punting territory, why not just arm punt on 3rd down? And you can get a PI, that's a first down. You get a completion, that's better. If it's picked off, who cares? If it's incomplete, you're punting anyway. And so one thing that I have liked about that is, like, I think we're going to see once they get into the season, obviously, and they open up the scheme in a way they just didn't in preseason, but we got to see some of in training camp. We'll see how often Jaden throws those benders, those deep in breakers, things like that. But I think he's more capable than perhaps we realized coming out of LSU, because he didn't have to at LSU. But what I do appreciate is that deep ball that they know that he's money on, they're going to make sure that he gets the opportunities. And that's both him, because he's not afraid to throw it, and Cliff situationally. And it's also a chance to generate explosives that are, I don't want to say it's like automatic, we're throwing it no matter what. They're not going to be like, hey, yeah, throw it to Terry in triple coverage. But they know their offensive line is only so good. I'll phrase it that way. And deep balls can get out quickly. And Jaden has the touch and the accuracy to give guys chances on that. And I think situationally they'll set him up. So I am curious to see, one, some of those benders and some of those, like, I dare you to throws. Will Jaden do it? But they will also get vertical and try to create shots in other ways that are tied to his skill set that I'm really excited about to see if that continues in the way that it did in training camp. Because otherwise we have what we had last year, Nate, which was, man, this offense has got a shot. And it turns out it's because they were facing the worst defense in the league every day.
Where it looks great every single day. It's, it's a great point you're bringing up. And this is something I kind of, no, this is the Knicks argument or argument against Bo Nix was you have to try. It's the denominator that's so important with these things. It's the Jimmy G deep ball stat. Oh, he's the best deep ball thrower. Yeah, he's only doing it once a game. It's got to be once a quarter. Like,
Right.
you have to at least threaten the defense. You have to at least put in their head, yeah, he's not going to hit all of them, but shoot, I got to stay back. Safeties now are asked to do more than they ever have. And I'm willing to say that. And now but that means they have to come up. They have to go back. They have to get deep. They have to, rotate with the different motions and everything. Well, you got to put them in a bind. Like, if they're going to be doing all that, threaten them. And how you threaten them is with the deep ball. That's the classic way. And the other classic way is pounding the freaking rock. And which is, again, I think this has been misconstrued with the Cliff Kingsbury offense. That's going to be a huge component of this offense and a good component of this offense, even without Jane Daniels. I'm just, even including just a straight run game, that's what the thread of everything else they do with all the spread formations and the speed down the field is the run game opens up. And Robinson's a good hammerhead for that. Eckler's a nice spell for it. So also Brown and Scary Terry are like perfect for that verticalness. Like, they are best as vertical stretchers. So it's, again,
and they bring in Noah Brown, who's hopefully going to get healthy quickly.
Nice dirty work guy.
Yeah.
They got a lot of guys I like. I love Zacchaeus. Like, Jamison Crowder, I still have nightmares from at Duke. I was at Pitt, and he had, oh my God, watch that game. 2013, Duke versus Pitt at Duke.
Watch what Jamison did to you guys.
Jamison Crowder, Tyler Boyd, and Aaron Donald. And we had another receiver who had a good game, but that was like, it was a star-making performance by everybody. But all these guys, I mean, shoot, Pringle, Luke McCaffrey, every guy you go down on this roster, they are willing to do dirty work too. And that's why I'm like pretty excited about the run game. That matters. Like, these guys are willing to, and that's why those bubbles look good too. Is because all the guys on the outside are working their asses off. Like, that matters. And I people think I'm always joking about that stuff. I'm like, no, like, this stuff adds up. Like, if you want a good run game, these guys got to get dirty, and they're all willing to do it. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, if you want a good run game and if you want to get explosives in the run game, because it's one thing to get 4 yards, it's another to get that next block, and that's when it unlocks, and all of a sudden a dude's loose in the secondary. And certainly we're hoping to see that in Washington and wherever the burgundy and gold uniforms travel this season. Nate Tice, you don't have to travel to see him. No, he comes to you via your television on the NFL Network, your mobile device, or wherever you listen to your podcast, Football 301 from Yahoo Sports, and of course his articles on Yahoo's website as well. Nate, always appreciate it. Let's try to do this more often. Although we don't have to spend the better part of an hour together every time, unless you want to. If you want to basically work for our radio station, you're more than welcome anytime.
You're like, it's gonna be 20 minutes. You can go under if you want to. And I was like, yeah, always bet the over. It's
live from Vegas. Bet the over. Nate Tice, everybody. Appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
This moment of levity, Anthony. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Wrapping up the show. Do we have things for real things today?
Yeah, I pulled a couple things.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. What are you up to this weekend?
So immediately following the show, I will be getting on a flight to Atlanta.
Oh, I didn't know you were heading out of town this weekend.
Yes, sir. Every weekend this
month?
Every week for the rest of the year.
What?
I'll be going down. Well, not to Atlanta. I'll be
Oh, are you doing the college football stuff again?
Yes, sir.
Nice.
HBCU go.
So what are you doing for them this year? Are you like spotting, doing stats?
Yes, I'm spotting during stats. But before games, I'll be getting like some reps and things of that nature.
So Anthony, a little pregame analyst?
Something like that.
I'm Anthony Haney for HBCU Go.
Yeah, so I'm going to be going down there.
So what game you got this weekend?
So this weekend we have Clark Atlanta at Fayetteville State. Fayetteville's pretty good. Clark Atlanta has a quarterback that I liked last year, so hopefully, they've put together a couple of more pieces. But I'm excited. I'm not gonna lie.
So, hon, if you're doing this every weekend, though, how are you gonna get to NFL games so you can test the power of the curse and whether it's over?
So the crazy thing is, I'm actually going to Week 3, Colts, Bears, and I think my game Week 3 is in Richmond. So I'll be flying out of Richmond late Saturday night, and I don't see Zaire on Saturdays anyway. He usually have team things to do.
Right.
So I'll just get up with my line brothers. They'll pick me up, and then we'll go to the game, and then Monday morning I'll fly out and
be back here for work.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Racking up the flight miles.
I am indeed, and the good thing about covering, or being able to go city to city, my employer paid for my flight, and they use my flight mileage. So it's a great thing.
You get the frequent flyer miles.
Yes.
They pay. That's how it was when I was on the beat. Bro, one of my favorite years was when we played the NFC AFC West, because I got way more miles that year because the flights were all the way across the country.
Far.
And so, like, that part of it sucked. Like, there's a couple long flights. But, like, realistically, the AFC West that year, like, I think we had Kansas City and – it was Kansas City and L.A., and then the NFC West was like LA and Seattle. So like LA, Seattle, that was long. And obviously LA was twice, but like one of those was in December when it was cold as hell here. And that was sweet. And then Kansas City's relatively, like that's as far east as you can go for a West team. So like really wasn't that bad, but I got a nice little chunk of miles. So that was nice. But yeah, I'm in town for a couple more weeks. This weekend, chilling. Next weekend, chilling, and then we go to Indy for Fever Aces.
Yep. Oh no.
It's a couple weeks. I'll be doing the show from out there because we're doing stuff, but like I got to still do the show, but I'll just be doing it from a hotel room in Indy, which is fine.
Yeah, we were trying to see if we could cross paths, but we're probably not. Also, the U.S. Open, Tiafoe Ben Shelton match just ended.
Who won?
Tiafoe 1-5.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I was watching it.
That's
the fourth and fifth set. He took it.
I'm bummed that I missed it. But we had good stuff on the show today. What was your favorite part of the show today?
Favorite part of the show.
Standig was great today, talking about all the agent stuff.
Standig was good. I like Nate Tice though. You know, breaking down the X's and O's, the NFL trends, and seeing who's putting what into their offenses and their defenses. But I was more so interested in the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah. So check that out in the Hoffman Show podcast feed. You got all weekend to do it. In fact, you got Monday too. Labor Day, we're off. Obviously, we'll have great local programming. Linnell, Denton, all your usual cast of characters that you'd expect on a holiday weekend to be here on Monday. All right, Ant, let's see what you got in your magic bag of tricks on a Friday. It's time for Real Things Real People Said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be said this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
All right, Ant, what do we got?
All right, so we got a couple of things. I guess we don't really gonna have time for one of these, so I'm gonna go. Should we go Mark Cuban or Maverick Carter?
You tell me. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know how long the bites are. Make a decision quickly.
They're both a minute. So Maverick Carter was on the Pat McAfee show.
We don't have time for either of them. If they're both a minute long, the show's over in exactly 1 minute and 5 seconds. We don't have time for that.
All right. Here's one from yesterday. Mizzou versus Murray State. That was a bad lead up, but I'll explain.
And the 3 points secured. Now 51-0. That might be one of the guys that needed it. Actually, you know what? I guarantee that guessing. I guarantee.
I'm just guessing. He was excited about what that field goal did.
A little too fired up.
Sounds like maybe perhaps a line was crossed.
Yes, so the point spread or the line spread for Murray State versus Mizzou was 50.5, and the field goal by Mizzou with
51.
2
AKA,
seconds.
that's going to wind up on Van Pelt's bad beats.
It will indeed.
That's a rough one. But happy college football, land of bad beats. Enjoy the first weekend of it. We'll talk about some of it on Tuesday, and then it's NFL Week 1. We'll see you then. Have a great holiday weekend, everybody.